Well, hey there, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. It's 3 p.m. on a Saturday, so you know that means it's the SMITE Pro League. Gormizer here alongside me is going to be Mifflin. And Mifflin, we've got some fantastic sets starting out today. Starting off with Ghost going up against Renegades, one that is probably very big for Renegades to have as a proving ground against one of the top teams we've seen. And then later with Knights going up against E-United, probably even more important for those two teams to showcase what they can have. It's going to be action-packed, I think, from top to bottom. What are you looking forward to today?
Well, I think I'm looking a little bit more towards the PK United lineup because Ghost versus Renegades, I'll go out on a limb here. I'm pretty sure Ghost is going to win. I'd give him 80-20 odds. And usually your boy loves an underdog. I wouldn't vote for Obey for any other reason. But between these two against Ghost, I mean, come on, man. Ghost is Ghost. They're the best.
Yeah, I honestly, I think that that's all we have to talk about, right? Ghost is Ghost. Cool. Done and dusted. That's the set. Either way, no, we're going forward, looking at him. Part of what makes Ghost Ghost, Fine OK does really well over there in solos. Sam has been very big. Twig has had a hell of a year. But it really is the duo lane. It's PBM, I think, that starts things off every single game. And between him and Panda Cat, we've seen a lot of progress over the year and the way things have been going. What is it about this duo lane that just makes it work so much better?
I think it's really the synergy. I think it's that Panda Cat might be one of the most mechanically talented players in the league. But really, I mean, we're beating around the bush. If you're going to talk about Ghost Duo Lane, it's got to be PBM. He's got a diverse god pool. He's the premier Hercules in the league. I think he's the best Yamoja in the league. He's incredibly aggressive, and he doesn't really sacrifice too much for his aggression. Usually you see these players in support role decide whether or not they want to be a secondary jungler or be a support. PBM's kind of just doing it both, and he's doing them both really well.
And honestly, one of the things I saw out of that, every single one of those highlights, I completely forgot how solid his Yamoja ults were. Like, every single time that River's Rebuke was at the perfect angle to stop someone from getting away or to save his team. So it feels awkward because you just can't ban anything away from it. And then you get Panda Cat, as you had mentioned, the synergy not only existing there, but the fact that he can play so many different gods and make them all look good as well. It just does wonders for them over there. And then they transition to that 3v3 in mid, Sam for Saga. There's so much to talk about with Ghost that they do well. I think the list goes on and on. It's a much shorter list of things they don't do well, but today we're going to have to see how they fare up against the Renegades. Specifically, if you want to look at the matchup, we were just talking about a duo lane, then they're going to have to deal with Barracuda and Awesome Jake, and Barra has actually been off to a pretty good start this phase.
Yeah, Barracuda has been looking highly consistent. He's one of the few players in the league that's really prioritizing the soul. Usually when you think of magical ADCs, maybe Chronos once, Freya all the time, Oleron whenever you can get him. But Barracuda is bringing this diverse pick that's, one, you really don't want to target a ban towards, and two, he's paired with the most diverse, craziest support in the league. You think you're going to play against an Osiris support? I mean, I wouldn't have thought that, but Awesome Jake would do it. You think you might play against tier support? Well, not really, not any year before 2020. Awesome Jake's doing that, and that doesn't mean he can't play the more meta picks. He's also got a Jing Shen. The only thing that's consistent about Awesome Jake is that he is consistently looking to be aggressive.
And it's been interesting to watch that dynamic grow between them because this duo lane as a whole, not only was it Jake's first year in the Pro League, there were a lot of question marks around him at the very beginning, but we have seen him, whether it's on Xing Chen or not, have some games where he really is the one carrying Renegades to victory. Sometimes you see that onus go to Lasbra, but knowing that your support is there is just as important. We actually got to sit down with Awesome Jake to see his thoughts specifically about this set as they go up against Ghost, because we know it's going to be a big one, so let's hear what he had to say.
Alright guys, I'm here with Awesome Jake, the 408 support for the Renegades, and they've got a matchup against Ghost today, so we're picking his brain a little bit and hearing how himself and the team are feeling. Alright Jake, to kind of start things off, overview of the phase so far for you guys, 1-1, and you know, it was an 0-2, but a pretty close set to Sanguine, all things considered, so could be 2-0 for you guys realistically up to this point. How do you and how do the team feel about where you are so far in the phase?
You know, we're feeling pretty good so far. We still have some room to grow, and we are looking forward to this Ghost matchup. We've been practicing pretty hard, and I think we can take the dub today.
Yeah, preparation, of course, always key, especially going into big matchups like this. I am curious, you know, the meta has been shifting all over the place, all across the board, all these different roles. Support didn't get any necessarily heavy-handed changes. We know you love your tiers, your in-your-face, aggressive, kind of warrior-esque supports. Do you think they still have a place in the current meta? Do you think your usual picks still work, given a lot of the other changes to the game?
Well, it's been working in scrims, and they're aggressive. They win lane, and if you win lane, you can use that to do a lot of things. Yeah.
Fair enough. Hey, if it works in scrims, hey, maybe it works on the SPL stage. Final thoughts going against Ghost. What do you think it takes to beat them, and do you think you beat them in the matchup here today?
Well, I thought we could beat them the first time we played them, and I thought we could beat them the second time we played them, and also the third time we played them. But I think they're an aggressive team. They play the early game very well, and if you could beat them in the early game, I believe you can beat them. So that's what we're gonna try to do.
Hey, fair enough, Jake. Appreciate you taking some time. Best of luck in your matchup today. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Well, wise words there at the very end, I think, from the 408 himself. And Mifflin, it really does come down to that early game that has been big for Ghost Gaming. We mentioned that if you look at the game timer at the end, if it's 25 or less, Ghost probably won. If it's 25 or more, it's a little bit of a different conversation. So we're going to have to see if they're able to do that one. As we just go ahead and jump into picks and bans here for game number 1. Is there anything the Renegades you see maybe doing here to try and control that early game immediately out of picks and bans?
Well, I'm thinking warrior supports, but I think it's interesting to point out that the majority of the time when we talk to the pros about playing against Ghosts, it's withstand the early game, make it through the early game, make yourselves get to mid game. What did awesome Jake 408 of San Jose say? He said, I'm going to beat them in the early game. I'm thinking very early spike odds. Maybe we see Barracuda on the Uul, Jake likely on a warrior, maybe Tier, Hercules, something along those lines. If you want to win early, I think there's only one person you really need to target out hard in your bans, and it's gonna be PBM. So I like this start for Renegades. Ban out Yamoja, don't let him get Hercules, and I guess frag out. Jake said it himself. Win lane, win game.
And, well, we've seen it be so prominent for them, specifically this Nemesis coming through as well. It feels like Ghost, a little bit of, hey, this is meta, but also a little bit of, hey, this is Lasbra, and what we have seen the Renegades do well on. I think there are two pillars to try and control there, and, we talked so much about the duo lane. It's very fitting, then, for Renegades to be banning out not just that Yamoja, but also that Uul as well. This is where the conversation, I think, gets created. Do you ban a Hercules here, or do you risk letting Ghost have it?
I mean, with Oleron still on the table, with these magical ADCs that are just so dominant, I don't imagine you could look to ban Hercules, but instead they're going to let Oleron through and ban out the Persephone, another incredibly strong pick. But Ghost Gaming, beat him in the early game when PBM's on Herc. I don't think anyone's going to do it. I don't think Ghost Gaming could do it. The only one that beats PBM is PBM. As far as bans go right now, they might have opened themselves up. If Hercules gets picked up first, RNG could pick up the Oleron. If Ghost take Oleron, I would expect Renegades to be taking that Hercules.
Well, the 100% ban rate, I think, showcases why you were a little worried about him getting through here. Oleron first picked. And there's been this conversation about the tiers. Obviously, we had mentioned that Barracuda loves his soul, so maybe it's not that important for them. We saw what SSG could do yesterday in dealing specifically with Freya. Do you think Renegades are going to be able to take anything either that we saw yesterday or some method to try and shut down this Oleron as fast as possible?
Well, it seems like they've already taken one note out of their book, which is that Jing Shen. Likely going to see a Witchblade come through. Anything that's going to be able to mitigate the auto-attack damage coming from this Magical Hunter is going to be huge. Ferocious Roar, fantastic tool to make sure that those auto-attacks, even if they are hitting, aren't hitting nearly as hard. Witchblade to slow down the auto-attack speed. Likely going to pick up 2, maybe 3 shells for the Renegades. But even then, with all those things you're going to dedicate to shutting down Oleron's auto-attacks, I wouldn't even say that's his strongest suit. Oleron drops Sanctified Field, all of a sudden Renegades aren't going to be allowed to play for the next 5-6 seconds.
And it's definitely going to be, well, just difficult. It is a nice wide ultimate that comes into the field, so it changes a lot. But they pick up this set, which we saw do really well for Lasbra. I think it was a 6% pick rate, and that 6% was literally the game they played, and his 100% win rate was also that game they played. Just a very phenomenal start for them, and it feels like they're playing to their own strengths. But now there's Heimdall on the other side, you've got Hercules on the other side. I mean, it's kind of hard to argue against the draft that Ghost are picking up. Every single one of these feels like a good pick for them.
Yeah, it's a tier list pick all the way through, and there's even a little bit of flex coming through here. That Oleron could go to mid, it could go to duo, Heimdall could go mid, it could go to duo. I think we're pretty fair betting that Oleron should go into that long lane, just a little bit easier to farm up over there. And Renegades, again, if you're playing for the early game like Jake said, I'm not sure that this Soul's really going to fit that style. She needs those itemizations, she needs to get all those things available to her so that she can really start to use those auto attacks. And Soul's auto attacks, likely the most inconsistent of all the magical hunters.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how Barra decides to adapt this one. It was one of those I was on the fence about it last week, and we saw it work and not work, so it really is just kind of up in the air to how the matchup goes. And that's actually what I'm going to look at. While the bans are coming through, I want to ask you, you had mentioned Oleron, Heimdall, both can go in the duo, both can go into mid. Which one would you rather see paired up with that Hercules that could maybe shut down either the Xingqian or specifically the Soul a lot harder early on?
Well, if I want to shut down the enemy lane, I'm definitely putting Heimdall over there. The kill potential is just so much higher with Heimdall. His power spikes come a lot more quickly, but I don't think that's the argument to be made. I really do think it's, we need this Oleron to get to late game, and we want him to get there safely. Let's take him out of that 3v3 in mid. Let's make sure he's able to farm up freely, get some ward coverage to the duo lane, make it a lot harder to gank. I think Oleron's much, much safer over in the long lane, which is why I really do think Ghost is going to send it there.
Well, we'll have to see what they do. I tend to agree with you. It's safer over there for them. And again, it's just a ticking time bomb until you get your items online most of the time. But it's the Raven, the Pele banned out from Renegades, the Cupid, the Aphrodite banned out there from Ghost. So a little bit of homework done on what Venenu was running last week. They pick up the Wukong. And I want to get into the fact that Vin played Yanis, but I feel like there's just no time for it until they either lock it in or lock in something else. But how do you feel about Wukong? Recently got the buff to his stun, so at level 1 on 72 transformations, that Tiger stun is the same as it is at max 5. Do you feel like he's going to be able to hold his own in solo lane?
I think he can certainly hold his own. Sun Wukong has never, ever been the guy who's going to lose a lane. Back before the Soul Eater changes, he was just this pick you would take, okay, I don't want to lose out, I don't want to get killed, I want to play safe and make sure I can at least disrupt backline come late game. We used to call him Jormungandr Light. But now with the Soul Eater changes, giving an additional pen, making the lifesteal come through on the minions before you even have to evolve it, it makes him a much more versatile pick. And his fight potential, now that the stun is a lot longer at rank 1, means that instead he can max out the Master's Will on a lower cooldown, more damage consistently, and not sacrifice too much in terms of CC. Sun Wukong is a strong pick, but I don't think he's best in class.
Well, this is an interesting lineup for both squads that I'm looking at right now. Renegades are playing 5 gods that feel very Renegades from what we've seen in the last couple of weeks. From the matches they've played, they are the ones that they have leaned on and picked up and found some success with. Whereas Ghost, and you'd kind of said it earlier with the top 3, but I think honestly all 5 of them just feels like they're running a tier list straight down. Like, hey, what's best over here? What can be best here? How do we balance it all out? The Thor, the Amaterasu closing it out means they're a little heavy on the physical side in terms of damage. Is that going to impact them positively, negatively, or at all in this game, or do you think that they can just run it through?
I think it should work out just fine. Usually when you only have 1 magical damage output, you want it to be someone who's putting out some major damage. Oleron brings that in spades. And that said, Ghost's early game draft here, you have Thor controlling the map with that semi-global ultimate. Hercules controlling the map because PBM's behind the wheel. Amaterasu is that engage tool. Ghost might just be able to run over Renegades pre-15 minutes.
And that's going to be, well, the typical Ghost style of play. We'll have to see if they're able to do it, or if Renegade's draft is going to be able to hold up a candle to what Ghost have brought into this game as we jump down here to game number 1.
Hey, thank you on the desk there, guys. Finch and Hindu on the cast as we start things off. I want to remind you all to make sure you vote who you think's going to win in the poll right there in the chat between Ghost Gaming and Renegade. Hindu, has your opinion on this match been swayed at all by these picks that we're seeing here in the draft? Barracuda on the Soul, Thoth for Venenu in the mid lane. Don't see a lot of him nowadays.
No, we don't, but I think when you look at the picks and bans and how things played out here, Finch, it really feels to me that both teams are obviously adapting to the new meta, right? We're seeing a lot more mages, but I think the biggest key here is that Renegades knew they were leaving Oleron up, right? And we know the magical ADCs are very vogue right now, and they've drafted to try and deal with that, but for me it's going to come down to what the junglers can do this game, and how the duo lane starts more than anything else.
The duo lane, oftentimes important. The supports can rotate out and impact. Hunters, though, often staying on their own island till later on in the game. We'll be seeing the Heimdall v Soul matchup, so we'll get to see how some of these ability-based hunters can fare off against the magical ADCs, different ends of the meta clashing here between Panda Cat and Barracuda. We'll also see some aggressive supports with the Xing Chen and the Hercules, and where these two might end up potentially. I know you said these junglers are going to have a big impact here. Obviously Thor will, but when do you expect Lazarus to get involved on this set?
Let him get a couple of levels online. Let him get his Golden Blade, get a couple more items. Because I think both of, honestly, with Set specifically, he's had a lot of adjustments as of late that have seen him rise to power. And I think Renegades have done a very good job of identifying the mid-season patch of where strengths have come from. Set got buffs, as did his itemization. Sun Wukong got some buffs as well, as did his itemization. And it really shows that they're looking at the meta and they're looking at what could be possible for them to make really good use of here. Start of this game, though, has been pretty impressive because no purple buffs have gone down so far.
And Jake's in trouble. A whole rotation coming over towards the purple buff. Hammer not quite going to get there, though, from Sam for Soccer. So Jake still standing tall for now as Ghosts continue to insist on trying to strip away this purple buff. We're seeing lots of early game action, though, but I don't think you'd be too surprised with the aggressive Hercules for Mike.
No, completely agree, and I think that's the biggest key there, is that Mike on the aggressive Hercules is going to get the pressure in this lane. Sol Jing-10 aren't going to have an easy time with things, and I think that could be... Oh, I wasn't sure if you had Jingu bang up there, because a bit of pressure for Flying OK in the early game. Kind of expected on the Amaterasu up against a Sun Wukong, who's just got a bit more effective wave clear in that early stage.
Now, Amaterasu can struggle pretty early, and I don't know if Sun Wukong's going to have more value than he's got right now, but I guess I'm letting my Sun Wukong bias come through. Feels like he's the I don't want to get decided god, and I don't know that he does a whole lot else well, but made stronger by some of these changes. I think Soul Eater can work well for him as well right now. Hindu Man Sun Wukong, I think we might be seeing more of him before we see less.
Completely agreed. I think the other thing about it is we talked a little bit about the meta changes to him. Well, his transformation stun, the Tiger form, the stun duration is increased now. It's 1.4 seconds at all ranks. That might not feel like a lot, but the longest CCs in the game of stuns are only 2 seconds for the most part. So that really means that like this increase of 0.4 seconds is going to be a bit more useful. Not only that, it's the passive, the undefeated body. Once upon a time, he'd get that passive kicking in at 40% health threshold. Now it's at 50%. It may not seem like a lot, but when you think about the effectiveness of still wanting to stay in the fray and box out when you're in the half health as a solo laner, that's more effective for you in the long run. And it's one of the reasons we see him. I think the other reason, though, in this game specifically, is to deal with that Oleron and be able to get to him in the back line and not worry about getting hit by that stasis field.
That might not be a bad idea. Someone's going to have to get back there, though. Captain Twig on this Oleron will certainly become a problem as this itemization starts to come in. I mean, we've obviously talked about how strong Ring of Akate is, but Typhon Spang can oftentimes perform those builds as well, adding in all that extra light steal, and obviously the percent penetration as well. There's just good itemization for these mage ADCs right now. That's why we see the Soul here, the Oleron, oftentimes Freya band as well. They're just legitimately strong right now.
No, completely agree, and I think Oleron at the moment is in a great spot. He's one of the better mages at objective fights. Just because of that ultimate, he can really just force people away or to use defensive relics or CC immune ultimates to make sure they're going to get through this. As this game goes on, the more concern I'm going to have is regarding Veneno and what he can really do in this game. Because I feel he's going to have Hercules and Thor and Amaterasu that are all going to try and make sure he's out of the fray. But he's definitely a threat to Ghost Gaming too, and that's the reason you're going to see Ghost get aggressive against him. Because of that long-range artillery, he can stay away from Oleron and still put out the damage you're looking for and not have to deal with that stasis field as the game continues. But it will be a battle of CC immune ults, and I did mention about the junglers being a specific, focus in this one. It's mainly because both teams here, Finch, play through their junglers so much. I mean, all last split and into this split, they are the leaders in terms of kills and deaths on their team, respectively. It shows that means they're engaging fights and finding results, but they're also dying for their team too. So keep an eye on both these junglers as this one continues.
Yeah, and it's not just, the role. I think that Lasbra, in a lot of ways, impacts how Renegades do in their game. So much of their success is dependent upon him, because they can seem a bit lost sometimes in the late game. This Renegade squad can, in terms of deciding where they want to go, how they want to take these fights. And a lot of it, I think, on the field just sort of gets decided by how well Lasbra is able to find space in the back line, or maybe take someone out of the fight early on. It feels like they really do rely on that.
completely agree. I'm really a bit surprised actually going into this one when I look at it now, Finch, about what Jake said in his interview. You know, they said like if we can beat them in the early game, then we'll be in a good stead. We think we can beat them, but they've not drafted for the early game at all. Like, however, all in mid.
Yeah, Jake's trying to find Captain Twig, but Twig with a quick use of beads makes it out of there A-okay. But I think Jake is happy to trade up that Whirlwind of Rage and Steel for the beads from the Oleron as often as possible. Without those beads, Oleron instantly becomes a lot less safe. Sanctified Field is strong, but Oleron really needs those beads to be as safe as possible.
I completely agree, and it's funny as well, because if you think about it, Twig would love to just use his ultimate there and save his beads, but you can't do that against Xingtan. You know, he's still going to use his ultimate, it's still going to go through that stasis field and not do anything to you because of the CC immunity. So he's forced into a tricky spot, and once those beads are on cooldown, that makes a bigger issue for others. Look at where Sam is right now. It looks like they were trying to make a play in mid here, but Renegades want none of it.
I saw a small play I liked there from Ven. Maybe they're all getting a little bit more comfortable playing against this Herc, but he's charging at you. Sometimes it can be a little bit safer to step closer to the Hercules, because obviously he only pulls you with the very tail end of that second ability, but then narrowly avoiding it and able to avoid having to use anything like beads or even reposition. It's hard playing against Hercules in the early game, man. Hindu, I feel like there's not a whole lot of gods more impactful than him throughout those first few minutes, but so far Renegades have avoided anything too disastrous.
I mean, he's got really two good forms of CC in his kit. He's got good sustainability in his kit. But not only are those two forms of CC good in the early game, they both intertwine so effectively with each other that you could use the Driving Strike into an Earthbreaker if you wanted to. But you could also like do the other way around, the classic Earthbreaker into the Driving Strike. So he's got a lot of setup for his team and can force beads a lot of the time. Because when you get hit by an Earthbreaker, most people's immediate reaction is, oh no, I've got a beads, before you assess the field and whether he can even do anything off the back of it.
Yeah, I think everyone that's played Smite has some PTSD off being pulled in by Hercules, right? Just on reaction.
Yep.
You don't want this to happen to you any longer. We've been here before. So it hasn't been as bad for Renegades so far throughout the early. And as you said, maybe a bit surprising. It seemed as though Jake and the squad had some kind of leanings towards this early game, but they've got great tools come late, right? Set's only going to get better, Thoth and Soul. I mean, I wouldn't mind waiting till late if I had their draft.
And they really should. Mid to late game is what they want to do, but how much do they lose in the early game? And look at this on the left-hand side. This is just domination from Ghost early on, you know. Go into the jungle, strip buffs, keep the pressure rolling, because Renegades have to get on an even keel at some point. Now, if you think about the fact we're talking about Ghost getting an early game lead here, if they could turn that into a Gold Fury with the all-around that we've been talking about, this is just making the lead a bit trickier. So Renegades are on the back foot, but when can they find the turnaround is going to be the key in this one.
Solar Troll has been caught by the Hammer. Ghost are aggressively in the jungle of Renegades, but SOT as a Sun Wukong, so rarely is he ever in any real danger, even send some damage back the way of PPM as they retreat. But that's directly to your point, isn't it? Ghost are kind of setting up shop on the enemy side of the map. We just saw them invade the red. They were looking for back harpies just now. They're trying to use some of these gods who are really strong in the early game, like the Hercules, like this Thor, to bully Renegades.
Yeah, and that's what they really should be doing. And I noticed as well that you've seen the build the Solo Troll's gone for here. He looked like he might have been in danger there, but it's 3 physicals against him. So what do you do when you know you're going to see 3 physicals over and over again? Get that Breastplate of Valor, Taylor's oldest time. Nice driving strike from Mike there, but he's still on his own, or is he?
Yeah, bit off way more than he can chew. Had some help there from Awesome Jake. Another kill for Lasper across the map, so 2 land for Renegade. Sam trying desperately to even up the score. He gets 1, but may have signed his own death warrant. Awesome Jake there to make it a 3-for-1 across the map. What a swing for Renegades.
Yeah, and it's a great play from them too, if I'm honest, Finch, because what did they do? They realized that Solo Troll's got a positive matchup in the early game against Fine OK, right? So on the Amaterasu side, Lasbid looks to pay attention there. Sam, meanwhile, is going for a gank in duo, and that's why Mike goes aggressive early, but their timing is just off. Their communication level isn't correct, and Sam takes too long to get to the sky. Either Sam's too late on coming in, or Mike's too early on the engage there. So that miscommunication hurts them pretty effectively, because if you think about how that duo lane was going, Renegades were behind there.
Yeah, I gotta think that maybe Mike hadn't seen Jake to that point. Like, he maybe just kind of saw Barra and thought he had a chance to get in early and do some damage. I think if he knew he was going into the 2v1 that early, he'd have certainly hesitated. Because as exactly as we saw, Barracuda commits the ultimate at his feet and pretty much turns that one around right away with some help from Jake. So now in 3-for-1 swing, and what was maybe a 300 to 400 lead for Ghost off of invading some camps here and there is now completely shifted over towards Renegades' favor, about 400 in their direction.
And that's what we're looking for here in Renegades fan, right? I mean, you knew they were going to struggle in the early game, but 10 minutes to 16, I'd say, is where the transition from early to mid is happening. And if they can stay still like this, I'm feeling more comfortable about them when we get to that mid-game. I'm not trying to say Ghost composition, by the way, is bad in the mid to late game. It's good,
Right.
but this is where Renegades start to come online too. And I think Ghost realized that, so they're trying to commit to this Fury.
It sure seems like it, but it's always scary when there's a Thoth on the map. Final Judgment can be charged from far away, but Venenu never even gets it pulled up. Ghost secure the Fury quickly and able to disengage just as well. Renegades really can't get anything on the back of that, and just like that, the lead back very slightly in favor of Ghost.
Beautiful call as well from Ghost, because the recognition came out that Fine OK had seen Lasper on the right hand side, so they knew the jungler wasn't around, so the full commit was, hey, we got a man advantage, but now Renegades are trying to answer back.
They're starting up Pyro, but Lasper gets forced off by Fine OK. There to back him up is SOT, but the Ghost Boys are ready to back off. That means Gold 3 and Pyromancer will belong to Ghost Gaming. A good way, I think, to turn around this early game for them, since they lost all those kills to Renegade in that skirmish. Now, by controlling the objectives, they've grabbed the lead back.
Some of the hardest things in SMITE is, like, when you lose an objective, you're like, but we need to equal the field now. We've got to do something. So they go with a Pyromancer there, and Ghost just aware of the situation of like, hey, guess what, guys? We still don't see him. I guess they're at Pyro, and instead of taking the fight, they force Renegades off and then just take the Pyro away from them, so extend their lead further. It's good ideas from Ghost, but Renegades just getting caught a little bit sleepy there. I like the idea of trying to do Pyromancer to answer back, but I feel like sometimes that can really be a bait. You kind of see that around Fire Giant sometimes too, or after a Gold Fury, where you'll try and run down the team that did it, just to try and find a, well, they got gold, but we killed two, you know, just to make you feel better about a situation.
This might be a good chance to take a look at these support builds. Look at Polar Bear Mike showing the strength, I think, of the Warrior support, getting to pick up that sledge early on in the build. One of the most offensive, or one of the most efficient items, rather, I feel like a tank can buy at this point, Hindu.
Yeah, I agree, and I think Sledge is in a really, well, good spot overall. I don't necessarily think this is the most need nerf item just yet, but one day it will be, just to be clear. I think there's plenty of other things like the Hecate abusers, which we'll get to eventually, I'm sure. But yeah, I do like the Sledge pickup early on. Think about how Gauntlet of Thebes gives you 10 all prots when you've got that stacked, right? Sledge, for one enemy being around you, is giving you 10 all prots. If there's 2 enemies around you, you are getting 20 all prots. Like, it's a pretty good item, if I do say so myself. However, we'll point out that Jake can't buy that item, but I do like that they went for a sovereignty here. They're starting to realize that there's a hell of a lot of physical damage on Ghost. It's why you see Solo or Troll go for the breastplate. But seeing Jake invest in this sovereignty early is going to be more impactful for his team to keep them topped up and force Ghost to get a bit more penetration to counteract that earlier on.
Not the only place with an interesting build. Look at Captain Twig with his third item, electing to pick up the Toxic Blade. This is an interesting item. I feel like sometimes you can see this forced into Freya builds, but into the Oleron build, perhaps just worried about all this healing. I mean, there certainly Set can get some healing done. Soul as well. Do you like the Toxic Blade here?
I love Toxic Blade in general. I think it gives you health, penetration, attack speed, and movement speed, right? Like, that kind of works on almost any god, and that's why it's, you know, a catch-all item to an extent. Sometimes it's tricky to get in the build, but think about Renegade's composition here. A lot of sustain in this. You're going to have to deal with his soul, with the Hecate and the Typhon's Fang. You've got to deal with a Jing 10 passive regeneration, which can be really strong in the later game. But not only that, you've got a Set in the jungle, and Set sustain can cause some issues as the game continues. I like the pickup, and I don't think it's going to be a deficit in terms of damage output, but he is very auto-attack focused then, not ability focused with this build. However, Hecate is already swinging in that way anyway, so you're just doubling down some more.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where he'll go after this, if he wants to prioritize any more attack speed, like something like a Demonic Grip, or if we'll see what has become pretty traditional in the builds as well with the Typhon's Fang. We'll keep an eye on where Captain Twig wants to go. Aside from that, though, things looking pretty standard elsewhere across the board. We see Lasper picking up a shifter shield relatively early, but that might be sort of, as you mentioned, in response to the physical heavy composition from Ghost Gaming, trying to do a nice hybrid item that can still get some damage and some prots.
Completely agree, and that's just a little bit of safety, right? A little bit of defense. Just, sure, all these guys are physical, but are they all building penetration to get through the base armor level? And if they aren't, well, adding some more armor to that reduces the amount of damage and gives you a bit more survivability. So the carries have to go into penetration, and if all this, physical composition wants to try and get something out, they have to keep investing in pen. For example, look at Sam. Roller's beat stick, great on pen. Transcendence, not so much. So it does mean that, like, for now, sure, he'll get an overall power spike, but the damage he'll put out will be lower based off the armor the enemy team has.
Something to keep in mind, I think, for the rest of Ghost Gaming as they try and decide on where they're going to go with these next few items. A lot of health in this Hercules build, so you'd think some percent health items might get some value if he becomes the target. The game, though, has slowed down a bit, but I expect that to change here shortly. Fury now respawning, and nearly everyone, all 10 players on the left side of the map, so certainly they both recognize its value, but SOT might be a bit caught out, getting his ultimate forced as well. Silence out of the 72 transformation, still holding the ultimate. Finally, SOT chooses to use it in order to help him disengage, but that's a win for Ghost. They committed very little to get that ult.
Agreed, and that was a really good pincer maneuver from Ghost as well. They recognize Solo Troll's coming in late, he's trying to flank around the back. If they take him out of the fight, it means he's going to base, and Ghost is trying to commit on that. Bad news bears, though. Solo Troll had his teleport, so he will be here, but can they do anything?
Ghost able to get the Oni, but what about Sam? He took to the sky and needs to find a target, dunks down onto SOT inside the Sanctified Field. Jake is the one that falls first. They look for Laspra on the back of the fight as Twig gets removed from their number. Fino K barely alive as well as Laspra does get claimed. It's a double for Panda Cat and a 2-for-1 in favor of Ghost so far, but Renegades are on the hunt. Barracuda and Ben still full HP pushing forward, but Sam there with the peel. Ghost should be able to make it out without any more casualties.
Good word from Ghost there, but you saw exactly what that all-around stasis field's going to bring there, Finch. Drops it down, and what do you see? Both Barracuda and Venenu have to sit so deep to avoid being inside that it's hard for them to get the damage off. Ghost, meanwhile, all group up like a clump and take out the front line. Solo Troll without his ultimate, I mean, there's not a whole lot he can really do there, so he's forced to disengage. So that whole fight was really forced from the initial Sun Wukong play, where they forced Solo Troll's ultimate before this fight even started. Good opportunity from Ghost. Renegades are having a hard time reacting to it. I don't think it's doom or gloom for him just yet, but you can start to see where the struggles are going to be in this team fight. And I'm really, again, looking at Venenu for what he can do from distance here, and if he can find some prime real estate with some of these shots.
I've been very surprised Ghost has decided to take two relatively coin flippy objectives. I mean, I think both times they did have good control of the camp, so certainly not 50-50, but still, when you're up against a Thoth, those do have some added risk for your Hindu, but I don't think we've had to worry about the final judgment for Ghost so far, as Pyromancer goes down for Ghost as well. They have absolutely controlled these neutral objectives.
Agreed, and I think the other thing that we really didn't touch on was the Thor ultimate. You mentioned that he went to the sky there, did Sam. But when Thor's in the sky and there's a stasis field down, and you're a Toth in that situation where you're like, well, can't go to the stasis field, boys. But at the same time, I can't stay at the edge because the Thor's going to dunk me, so I have to be ready for him to land on my face. And I think it was just really good play from Ghost to recognize their gods and how they will work as a unit to establish the result of that Fury.
Yeah, use that Sanctified Field to establish control, then send Sand up to make it less safe for Venenu to charge up the ultimate. Really Ghost Gaming controlling that Gold Fury pit, and as you said, using all these ultimates at the same time to make sure there really wasn't any way for Renegades to force their way in. Now, a strong lead for Ghost, a level lead in every lane except Solo, where SOT is a little bit ahead of Final K, but I think that is within expectations for Ghost. They've controlled this early game about as well as you could hope, and now own about a 4,000 gold lead.
Yeah, it's a comfortable lead for now too. Keep an eye on what Lasbra can do though, because that last fight, I don't think it was too bad. It was just a little bit late on the engagement trying to get in there because of the, obviously, again, the Aloran stasis field. But I think a lot will depend on if he can get to the back line, because Ghost there swarmed him incessantly because they knew everybody else was taken care of. So if Lasbra can time his windows effectively, he can cause disruption more than anything else in those engagements. Funny enough, as you watch this fight go off there in the jungle real quick, Nemean Lion online for Barracuda. One of the items I expect to see a little bit more of as this season continues.
It's become a popular pickup for carries, splashing in one defensive item, especially against these auto-attack focused assassins like Zet, who's seated against Nemesis, and some of these other ones as well. It's become a really popular pickup, and for good reason, man. Those block stacks are strong. Sometimes you only need a little bit. I think it was earlier today we saw the Shell, not exactly the same thing, but certainly those block stacks used against Freya to completely immune out those that damage. These block stacks are strong.
And the shell that you're talking about there, the upgraded shell specifically, I mean, you can see Jake's already got one here. So you think about Barracuda in some of these fights, right? He's going to have 4 attacks that won't go through and penetrate him. And when you think about the attacks that he's going to receive, if it's Panda Cat, we know Heimdall swings for the fences every single shot. So you know you're saving yourself some health there. And that's 4 times he could save that. But not only that, we talked about Twig a little bit earlier on, and he's gone for a little bit more of a basic attack focused build, which you expect. So that means that he's going to be able to absorb some of that damage too. It's not a terrible look, and one of the craziest things that people always say is that carries, you know, if they're building defense, they're not doing damage. But if you're dead, you don't do any DPS at all. So survivability is going to obviously be an increase based off what would happen.
Especially against someone like Set. Oftentimes, you really only need a little bit more time to create space, to get a little bit more damage off, something like that. Most times, if Set decides you're going to die, it's really hard to prevent it. It's so much about buying a little bit more time to get all your abilities off, to get all your damage off. Aggro preaches it all the time. Sometimes when you're a mage, your job is only to get your damage off in fights and just hope that that's enough. And I think that Hyde and the Nemean Lion, these block stacks, a lot of the times can get you to that, as we're not too far from this next Fury showing up again.
Definitely, and we mentioned Lasper a couple of times so far in this set because it's one of the first times I've seen Set in a second. I'm glad to see him back in the meta. But look at the carries he's trying to go after here, Finch. I mean, are you really going to get an all-around that effectively? And then if you get to Panda Cat, what's Panda Cat going to do? He going to keep you around long unless you're going to, you know, beads that ultimate every time. So it's a tricky task for Lasper to really get to the carries he's after. You may have to start looking at going for some of the half tanks, let's say.
Alright, they're both doing hybrid builds. Twig's in trouble. Dropped the Sanctified Seal, but a great ultimate from Pharah puts damage on him. But it's Jake who ends up falling first. Lasper, though, has made his way to the backline. He and SOT get the kill on the Twig to take the Olarin out. But Panda Cat recognizes Venenu's all alone. The backline, evaded, punished, used, and he ends up isolated. But a great driving strike from Mike collects 2 members and allows the backliners to pump out the damage. SOT falls. Fine completes the double by cutting down Barracuda as well, and Lasper, now the only member standing. He goes back in, looking for at least one, but Sam with the perfect wall shuts it down. That's the deicide for Ghost.
Sam read that like a book at the end too. He was away from the rest of his team. He knew the carries would be the ones to be threatened there. But going back to the fight, it starts off with a great play from Renegades looking at Captain Twig. And that was the focus. And Twig immediately does everything he can to buy as much time for his team to rally around him. And boy, oh boy, do they rally around him. Twig lived way longer than expected there. And some of that is obviously the sustain he's got in his kit, but also the peel he was getting from his team and the protections he got. It cost him beads, Aegis, but because it took so much investment of time for Renegades to find that pick, when honestly I feel like he could have died quicker, it ended up costing them big because Ghost just clumped and Panda Cat goes unchecked.
Now, Awesome Jake, the only one that can prevent this return Fire Giant on the back of the fight, but it's so hard for Xing Chen to have any chance. Perfect zoning by Polar Bear Mike using the driving strike to keep Jake away. That's the Pyromancer, Fire Giant, a deicide, and the Fury, all a favoring Ghost. And look at the charts, Hindu man. What was once a relatively close game where Renegades are in striking distance might already be out of reach.
The words blow the game wide open. I think you really can tell the difference when you look at the very best teams in the league, and Ghost is one of those right now for me. When you see these teams get a small window, they will destroy the game and really like separate their opposition apart and find a swing. And if you think about it, that was one fight that Renegades started, nearly picked off Twig, which looked good for them, and just cost them so much more. Punishment is a big thing in Smite. You actually lose the game more by mistakes rather than outstanding plays on your side in my eyes.
That's right, it's by opportunities that are either created or given by the other team, man, and I think Ghosts are the best at capitalizing on those that we've got in the league right now. And you heard Mike talk about it in those team interviews we did. Go check him out, man, on the SMITE Pro channel for Sanguine and Ghost. And Mike was saying he and Panda Cat have had such a successful stream together, and he's right. These two, as a duo lane, as teammates, across these last couple of years, have been the best we've got, man, and no one has shown us a consistent solution for beating them. They're always out in front.
It's mentality, I think, of the pair of them, because their playstyles are very similar for my liking. They both like to be aggressive, but they will both like consider a situation sometimes before engaging. I think they're both also willing to play for the team rather than the individual, although they will never admit that. They would like to be on the top sheet. This split up, though, I don't mind too much to try and separate Renegades up a little bit from the team fight, but that a little bit didn't work out well.
Oh no, Jake tries to grab Twig, instead gets melted. That is the Sanctified Field Force out, but Mike moves in. Good Tiger Stun does save Barracuda, but they're still able to collect SOT. Stays alive with that ultimate, has to use it quickly to disengage. Meanwhile, in mid, Sam and FineOK have completely pushed Renegades out of the mid Phoenix. They can rotate back over to left.
Yeah, it's been a bit awkward this because no Phoenixes are down, remember, and funny enough, with an Oleron and a Heimdall, I was expecting a different story. I think Ghost got a little bit bloodthirsty there for my liking. That wasn't very clean from them. They get a result, sure, but that could have been so much easier if they would have clumped after the engagement where you saw Renegades falling back to the fountain for safety. Now they're going to have to heal up a little bit in the jungle for a second, wait for the next minion wave, and see if they can do some more. Jake has respawned though. Venenu has his ultimate up, and I'm hoping to see Venenu try and do something if this is going to be a defensive.
Yeah, Venenu, though, gets clipped by the wall hammer combo. He does try to back up, but he's already been pushed out of it. But look at Lasbra on the long flank to the left, but Ghost recognizes it. Panda Cat, they send him over to deal with it as they continue to stand outside the mid-Phoenix and look to threaten, waiting on that next wave, but maybe not. Mike steps in right away, avoids the damage from Barracuda, and waits to re-siege.
Keep an eye on Lasbra though, just trying to hold that angle around the corner. Lasbra, in my opinion, is one of the sneaky assassins. There's a few in the league for sure, the sneaky junglers. He loves to flank around the back at the end of a fight or tries to get the angle. I think the issue he has is his decision making on when it's time to do that or when it's time to go in. And sometimes it doesn't work out. And now he's in an awkward spot and there's nothing he can do there.
Gets absolutely cleaned up, didn't have any relics, no beads or Aegis, and Sam perfectly lands the dunk to punish him. That was great. We've seen this a couple times lately where they feign that they're retreating, they feign they're backing up. Cyclone Spin did it on the Cupid yesterday for Radiance. It's working for Ghost as well, as now they threaten the mid-Phoenix. Two-man push from Mike. That brings Barracuda right into the Lion's Den. Sanctified Field, though, escaped by Barracuda, but the mid-Phoenix is going to fall, and I think Ghost are ready to keep right on pushing. They don't want to back off. Mike is right in the middle of the Titan room. Venenu gets pulled back to the squad. Panda Cat gets the kill. Awesome Jake low as well, but narrowly escapes. But the Titan is already down to half. FineOK has fallen. Ghost are a little spread out here, but they're re-engaging. The Titan's still taking damage. Polar Bear Mike is there, and Renegades cannot defend. That's Ghost finding the Game 1 victory.
Sloppy from Ghost at the end there, if I'm honest, because they weren't really, they were looking more for kills at the end. I like the way Ghost played, though. The early game, it's really weird, because Jake's interview, he really was saying, right? Like, let's get ahead in the early game, and we think we can go toe-to-toe. They draft a comp that's not early game at all, in my opinion, and then have to turn it around and do so, but then it comes back to haunt them in the later stages. I think Twig did a very good job of surviving there. The team realized that Twig was a key part of that, even if it didn't look like it. But the individual plays from Ghost were fantastic. I'm not upset about Renegade's play overall. I think there's just room for improvement still. We were saying that all last phase too.
Yeah, the objective control was the big difference for me, Hindu. It turns out the big mage ultimate's not so much king in objective confirm as space control, and that's what Ghost had in spades. We'll get it back to the desk, though, see what their opinions were.
Well, it's that I think Renegades started off pretty much the way they wanted to in Mifflin. Like, the first thing I wrote down was the fact that Jake was kind of right in some ways, where he had said they wanted to dominate or at least stop Ghost from having their early game. The problem was, and you kind of highlighted this, was that after a little while, the focus was so much on Twig and this Oleron that Panda Cat just had to do everything. And you had called for it during Picks and Bans, saying that, hey, if you send this Heimdall over to Duo, it's going to gain pressure, and Panda did exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, Renegades had the right idea, right? When you're playing against these magical hunters, they have such consistent damage output that you really do need to kill them in the early, but that doesn't mean there aren't other threats on Ghost's roster. Panda Cat was benefiting greatly. Twig, in every single team fight around these objectives, was getting ran at by 3-4 members of Renegades. Meanwhile, Panda Cat says, oh, you guys aren't going to look at me? Maybe I free cast for a little bit, kill your entire team, and you can just hold on that. And they really just had to hold that. Renegades were able to pick Twig a couple times, but at the cost of 3, 4, sometimes even 5 members. And then afterwards, Ghost took Gold Furies, they took Pyromancers, Towers, Fire Giants. The objective control was just ludicrous.
And it's always insane. This always ends up happening when we're talking about Ghost, but it'll be like, man, who really helped them win that game? It's like, well, Panda had a really good slash line and had a lot of good plays, but man, PBM did a lot of setup. FineOK did a lot of getting into the backline and causing a lot of trouble for them. Like, the way the team played together, and the way the team always plays together, tends to be what highlights them the best. Sam, 3-1-6, a lot of assists set up for him. Of course, Panda at 5-0-4, undying. And I think you could see the focus was mainly on Twig there, and it ended up paying off for the Hunter more than anything else as Ghosts take that one, again, in a very Ghost fashion. 25 minutes, it doesn't last that long, Mifflin.
It really didn't. And the last 10 minutes, I would say, victory lap. After 15 minutes, Ghost Gaming was in control the entirety of the time. I got to give shouts to Sam for soccer, man. I mean, when he sold out the enemy jungler on that long side of the map towards the end of the game, that was awesome. Yeah. Every single team fight he took on the Phoenix, he was finding these double tap hammers on a priority targets. Then essentially wasn't allowed to play the game unless he was willing to play at 50% because Sam was just keeping him there very easily from a safe range. This Thor pick really worked out. On the other hand, Renegades picking up Lazara on that set. I mean, 6.8k damage, man, in 25 minutes. That's tough. He got, what was it, 200, maybe 300 more damage than his support. You're going to need more from your jungler.
Especially when you see things, late game, both of them involved in one Lasberg getting Thor to kill when Fine just decides to dump his entire kit into the set and decide to not let him play the game that time around. So I think there were a lot of moments where that Thor was making a big difference. And it just, again, every single member of Ghost just seemed to kind of hit a stride at a certain point, and from that point forward, Renegades couldn't win. So we'll have to see if they're able to do it here as we go into game number 2. For Ghost versus Renegades. Notably, Renegades now going to be taking first pick over there, Mifflin. Is that going to change anything? Can they, alter their draft enough that this can hurt Ghost?
I mean, they could at least take away one of those major threats. If bans fall the same way, Renegades could get Ola for themselves, or even take away the Heimdall if you're worried about Panda Cat. And I'm not going to fault you if you're worried about Panda Cat, man. My man was an absolute threat in Game 1. I think Hindu Man really did highlight it best at the tail end of that cast. They said that they were going to look for the early game win, Renegades. Ghost didn't have to say it. We knew that's what they were doing. But if you're going to go for that early game win, you should draft around it, pick some pressure. But instead, they take a bunch of late game pieces that really didn't work out too well together. I mean, their most early game pick was Sun Wukong, and that was over in the solo lane. He really didn't get much priority or even involved in these fights until it was already too late.
Well, you had highlighted the potential pickup in Oleron here. So far, Freya, Oleron both unbanned as of now. Hercules joins the bans down there with that Yamoja for Renegades. They add the Uller back in there, so something, again, that feels very Panda Cat-oriented in terms of attack. I mean, Renegades, this ban, do you think taking that Hercules out is going to help them keep up and maybe even surpass that early game here, especially if they pick the Oleron?
I think it could, especially if they do take that Ola and you send it over the duo for that safe farm. But again, if Renegades are looking to play for the early game, I think that this might be a better pick. This Persephone is going to give you pressure in mid, a lot of poke potential to set up for your jungler to come in and potentially clean up a kill. You control the middle of the map. You essentially control the entirety of the map. You might be able to pick up some early objectives, but you have to flank this Persephone with strong side lanes. I want pressure out of duo. I want at least someone who can hold their own in solo and a high-pressure early game jungle. If you're trying to play Ghost at their own game, you got to bring the best absolute pieces that you can.
That's the one thing they have. Control the side lanes, then eventually mid can either catch up, or at that point it doesn't matter because you control everything else on the map, and it seems like they're more than happy to run at least some of their success back. Oleron, I mean, went to mid last time around. Can't think of a reason why they'd want to strip it away from Twig this time. How does that, I guess for either of them really, since we talked about the flexibility last picks and bans, for Heimdall or Oleron, do either of them have a particularly good matchup against a Persephone?
Not particularly. Persephone is one of those gods not unlike Thoth, who, if she doesn't want to fight you, she doesn't have to, but she's still going to poke you because she hits you from further away than you can hit her. She's also very safe, and if you do kill her, she's going to keep trying to kill you, one of the few gods, or the only god in the game who's able to just kind of stick around and keep fighting post-mortem. I love this pick from the Renegades. If you know that that Ola run is going to go mid, you want to pick someone who's got fantastic gank potential to exploit him in the early game. Thor, just about the best you could hope for. I mean, Anvil of Dawn is one of the best engage tools in the game, bar none. You got the wall to lock him down, no escapes for the Ola run, and you just have raw damage potential and follow up from a range from Persephone. I mean, good luck, man. That Ola run's going to be under a lot of pressure.
This hurts me to say it, though, Mifflin. Ymir, right now, 0% win rate. Granted, a lot of it has been under Obey's banner. Do you think he's going to be solid enough here? Is he going to be able to bring the freezes, the walls, everything that a Ymir can bring? And it pains me because I love him so much. He was my second Diamond God. Like, I love playing Ymir. I think his walls can change the game. But so far at the top level, we haven't seen him really hit that excellent mark that he can. Is this going to even bother Ghost at all?
Look, I'm going to speak directly from my heart now because I share your love of the Ice God. I
It's so
really
good.
do think, and we haven't seen it, we have no data points for it, but I really do think when played at the absolute top level, if Ymir is playing with task spot level of accuracy, just no missed inputs, playing perfectly, placing all those walls perfectly, he can be one of the best Guardians in the game just because he has unparalleled levels of map control. That wall, now that you can cancel it out, you get an early kill, cancel your wall, it's going to be up again in 5 or 6 seconds. You can maintain the wall for about 7 seconds, and against gods like Vamana, gods like Robin, gods like Olorun, they don't really have easy ways to get past it, and he still has fantastic forms of CC. If Ymir is ahead, even if he wants to sacrifice his life, he can set up on a Gold Fury, use his ultimate, and even if you kill him, the damage is going to come out afterward, and it will likely confirm the objective. Ymir is very versatile, but he is this double-edged sword. Fall behind in the early, you're going to lose the game. Get ahead in the early, you still might lose the game, but he can look absolutely strong.
It's going to be fun to watch how it plays through. Real quick, it was Serket, Hebo, and then Horus and the Kuzenbo band out there. Ghosts still have yet to pick something, in my eyes, that's going to go towards Mike. But you get Lasber now on what I would call a signature in the Pele. You get Jingwei back for Bara, where things are very, very comfortable and confident there. Renegades pick up a few power picks for themselves, some that are tier list, some that are comfort. How are you feeling about their lineup as a whole?
Man, I like it a lot more now. I really thought that Thor was going to go into the jungle, but having him in solo means that there's going to be 2 threats leaning towards that mid lane. Have Pele rotate in, maybe burn some beads, burn 50% of the health. If Thor's allowed to rotate out of lane even halfway towards the Pyromancer, Anvil of Dawn's going to dunk you down onto the Olorun. Renegades has a strategy here. It seems like they really want to control the center of the map. It's just whether or not they're able to execute on it. Ghost Gaming, on the other hand, wants to control the entirety of the map, which they could absolutely do. Vamana should get you pressure. Mulan should get you pressure. Olorun, not so much. But, there's so much strong early game picks on Ghost's side that it's just going to completely feed into their playstyle.
Well, we had talked about Mulan when Wrong Yu picked her up over there in the duo lane. I think there's some similarities you can draw towards being able to hit the grapple versus hitting your pluck as Hercules. There's a lot of setup potential, and I can't see Mike missing a lot of these, so I expect it to be high pressure. Do you think Mulan Heimdall, just based on what they played game 1, is going to cause a lot of trouble for the Ymir and the Jingwei early on, or is there enough counterplay out of the Ymir and Jingwei being able to disengage that they aren't going to dominate as strong as they can over there for Ghost?
Look, they might struggle killing Jingwei, but if they get off to a good start, that Ymir is as good as food, man. You get pulled in by the arrow, you get slowed by the Heimdall. I know, man, I don't want to see it happen either.
He's ice cream now, Mifflin. We're sad about it.
I think it could absolutely work. I think you might be able to win it out, but Renegades are going to need some assistance in that duo lane.
Well, we're going to have to see if they get that assistance or if it crumbles apart like Ymir's wall when it collapses here as we jump into game 2.
Thank you. On the desk there, Gore and Mifflin. We move into game number 2 between Renegades and Ghosts, as Mike does end up piloting that Mulan support. I mean, it was a bit up in the air about what exactly he was going to take, but Henry, how do you feel about Mulan's potential here being piloted by Mike?
Well, we were speaking off air for a second or two, and I'll be straight. I thought there's a slight chance we see the Vamana support here, just because of the matchup it has against the walls, right? You know, the big baby coming at you and just walking through the walls and doesn't really care could cause a couple of issues for them. But I still think the idea from that was maybe they give a rope-a-dope so there's a better matchup against the Thor in that lane rather than Vamana having to deal with it. It could have been that Mulan there is kind of what I was thinking. However, Mulan's support, it's got sustain, it's got good setup potential, it's a really good poke in the early game. She's very, very effective, honestly, with her first ability. I forget the name off the top of my head right now. But yeah, that just swings for the fences so much more than you expect it to in this early stage. I believe it's called Cross Strike, yeah. Silly name, that's why I don't like it. It's chops, that's all it is. Ridiculous amounts of chops that causes so many problems. So expect to see that really swing for the fences a little bit in the early game. I was a little bit concerned about how the pressure would be in this lane, but I think it's actually going to favor Ghost Gaming in this early game. We'll see how it works out.
We shall see. Not the only interesting spot, I think, as far as the support pick. Jake on this Ymir hitting level 2 very quickly has Cat and Mike all the way on the back foot. How strong do you think this Ymir pick is? Because I don't think we've seen it win at the SPL level yet, but it has looked impressive at times, Hindu. I think this pick can work.
I agree, it's viable. I think it's a viable pick in certain comps. Now, you may have got a bit of love overall as well to a little bit of his frostbite more than anything else, just being a bit more effective. As well as those walls, you know, coming up and down a little bit more quicker. It means if you make a mistake, you can adjust relatively quick. And someone like Jake, who's played a lot of Ymir over the years, will be quite comfortable on this god. I do want to touch on, though, what we saw there. You mentioned it, like, Jake had already hit level 2 in that lane. This is the new start that you could potentially start to see in the duo lane. You can have one of your 2 laners hit level 2 off that first wave early on. But hold that thought as we've got action in the jungle.
Yeah, and they've got the pincer here with Twig and Sam, but Venenu finds the angle over the wall. Very few gods able to make out of that one safely, but a good work from Ven getting out of what should have been an easily secured first blood for Ghost, instead denying them. But back to the duo lane start there, Hindu.
Yeah, basically the dual lane start is if you do purple buff now and then go to lane and just get 1 creep more than your teammate, you'll hit 2 quicker than your teammate. So your teammate will say level 1, but you'll hit level 2. Now if they're both there, they'll both still stay level 1 after the whole wave. So there's a slight window there that if one person misses a creep intentionally or not, that you can see a bit of a swing in this lane.
Yeah, the death warrant signed here for Awesome Jake when he missed that freeze. Hindu Panda Cat picks the first one up for Ghost Gaming, and I think really got to give credit to Mike more than Jake for missing. He kind of sidesteps it, throws off his timing by finding that grapple in between and kind of moving over to the side and avoiding it. When you're close to a mirror, it can be kind of hard to hit that freeze sometimes.
Agreed, and it's telegraphed too, which is one of the downsides of that freeze. It's a great ability and all. I mean, a huge AoE stun, yeah, you're not going to say no to that. But when you think about the wind-up time and how telegraphed and how close he has to be to make that effective, it does set him into an awkward spot, and experienced support players, just like Mike, will recognize how tricky it is in that sharper cone up front to try and find that stun in those situations. Good play! And now there's more pressure from Ghost on the right, but they won't find what they were after there. I like the idea of seeing Sam come over, but he was just a little bit too late to make anything happen.
Yeah, I think that wall from SOT helped as well. Lazarus was able to really stick the landing on the buff, and no way that Sam or Fine can make it in without committing even further, especially with neither of them having their ult at this point. So still relatively early, as only our mid laners have ticked over to level 5 at this point, Hindu. And Ghost, yet again, getting off to a really good start in this early game. We know that that is where Ghost is at their strongest. They play these first 10 minutes of the game better than anybody else, and Renegades so far struggling to find a way to best them.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned for when Ghost gets to team fights though, because they drafted their carriers in Oleron and in the Heimdall. We saw how they played around the Oleron and the lot in the last game, but look at their frontliners. Their frontliners all really want to dive in deep. The backline peel isn't great there, and the separation of trying to keep the carries of Renegades around that stasis field of Oleron like we saw last game isn't as easy. You know, you've got Jingwei, Great Escape, same can be said for Persephone. And even if you do get to Persephone, she don't really care that much, because when she's dead, she's still going to probably do more damage than she did when she was alive. I feel like most Persephones these days actually do more from death than being alive and well in the fight.
Yeah, you can just run in and do whatever you want, not worried about trying to protect yourself anymore. Perhaps that
hard life,
sort of
right?
Emboldens, yeah, these
I will say,
players. Yeah.
I will say, I'm a bit surprised that Aggro doesn't main it, because I see a lot of his streams that he's dead a lot of the time. Like, he'd be putting out more work on that. I'm surprised we haven't seen that from him yet.
Yeah, Aggro's the kind of guy that likes to be seen playing the harder stuff. As Venenu gets caught out, he dies too quickly for this passive to be all that valuable. I even might have thought it had been worth canceling it at this point. There's no way he's going to get any return kills here.
No, I think it was a little bit late on the cancellation more than anything else, so it just kicks in. At the same time, though, you saw a prime example of what I was just talking about. I mean, he did more damage to Twig after he was dead than when he was alive in that engagement. Obviously, they're not going to try and hit him because there's not much to do, but it's a really good pick again from Ghost, catching these angles towards the red buff, and that's just learning the timers and learning the rotations again, just knowing where they're going to try and rotate through. So keep an eye on this one goes on, because Ghost are trying to run away with it early in this.
And you talked earlier, Hindu, about how Ghost's front line is a little bit peel-light, and I agree, as Mike is looking for the potential invade on the blue buff, doesn't get there in time to steal, defended by SOT and Lazarus. In fact, with Jake here, they've got kill potential. Polar Bear Mike melts, and SOT gets Renegades on the board.
Yeah, great play from Jake there, honestly. That blink initiation was beautiful. I wonder if he's maxing his freeze, because I think he is maxing his freeze on Ymir right now and not his actual glacial strike, which makes a lot of sense to me because that duration increases as time goes on. No, he's actually just got that 1 point. It looked like it lasted forever, though, that freeze. That's why I was like, wow. But it was mainly, I guess, the burst damage that came through from Solo Watch's Thor Hammer that actually really just swung for the fences a little bit more than I expected. So that's the situation there. And with that, Renegades bounced back almost at that point. That play from Jake has set them up to kind of reduce that deficit a little bit and strip away some of the jungle.
Defending the blue buff has been huge for them. There's a lot of ways to try and develop an early game lead, and kills are not often the best way to do it. It's these repeated buff invades that set up for a small lead so you can move over to objectives like Fury or Pyromancer. But these blue buff invades from Ghost keep getting reflected, keep getting repelled by Renegades, whether it's the wall, whether Lasber gets there early. They're making sure they're on time so Ghost can't look for the invade.
Yeah, Lasper's doing a good job early on. Already got a level lead over Sanford Soccer in this early game, so he's doing a good job of effectively farming. It has come, though, at the cost of Venenu in mid. He took that tumble and is a little bit behind in experience there, which is seen as a big trick. I will talk a little bit about Ghost again, who've run 4 physicals 2 games in a row now. Quite happy to run the Warriors over the Guardians and see it a little bit more magical for them. But I do want to see these frontliners for Ghost as well go for Stoner Gaia this game.
Stoner Gaia strong at this point as Ghosts are looking to pick a fight. Venenu able to reposition, but over the top comes Sam from Soccer. Venenu lived through it all as Ghost commit 3 ultimates, looking to see if they can lock down Renegades. No dice though, as Mike continues to step forward. Awesome Jake might end up
so brave
out here. The freeze comes through, but the rest of Ghost Gaming are done with this fight. Polar Bear Mike is a solo agent. Look at Ghost. They are not trying to be here. Solar Troll comes in with the dunk as they give up on the Mulan.
Jake was really brave walking up, but if you think about all the ultimates that had just been used and abilities, there wasn't too much for him to really be afraid of there. And if you look at that fight, and it looks like, well, Mike, why are you there? I'm going to tell you a story about what a true support does, right? And Mike will probably tweet after this set, by the way, and say, no, I just messed up, right? But I want to give him the credit of, like, he sacrificed himself where he got focused down so the rest of his team could escape because they knew Lasber was coming in on that rotation, right? So sometimes in a situation like that, you might just be like, okay, I guess I'll save the frame, keep you busy so the rest of my carries can escape to the backside. And don't worry, it means I can go back to base and pick up Shillelagh anyway.
I'll take a look over at solo lane. SOT picks up the Soul Eater for his second item. He is not all that tanky. I think that's why Sam showing some presence here in right. He's trying to make up for a lot of that with the sustain and just kind of living off what little bit he gets from Warrior's Blessing as well. But so far, it's not been a big issue. In fact, looking to see if maybe he can find an invade on his own. Just settles for warding the Chaos side blue buff, and SOT backs off.
Yeah, I think the big key there with Solo Watchog in this lane is, like, yes, he's gone for the Soul Eater build this game, but I think that should be effective in wave clear, because I do expect a Breastplate of Valor, and funny enough, he's already investing in that now, just to do with the 4 physicals like last game on the Sun Wukong. But just being effective at wave clearing to match that of whatever mana brings to that lane is quite important for him. And if you can get that up and online earlier, we saw that he got a bit of a lead early on because of the rotation out of Jake and from Lasber there. So if you can try and double down and keep Fine OK on the back foot, it could be helpful for him. We'll see how it goes.
Well, earlier I was trying to make this point about some of the lack of peel from the front line here for Ghost.
Yeah.
And it's funny to the point where I might even say that the carries have the best peel for each other, right? Between the Sanctified Field, the ultimate from Panicat, the knockups, the slows. They really might be relying on each other, Hindu, in the backs of these fights if Mike and Fine OK are going to be more concerned with the dive rather than trying to keep their carries alive in the back.
Yeah, agreed. But I think both teams at the same time hold that, though. We got another little engage. Lasber's in trouble.
He certainly is. Has to use the ultimate to disengage.
freeze.
2-man stun, though, from
He came
Austin.
back
Jake
in.
is strong. SOT gets the hammer on Sam to punish him. Now, Fine OK stuck in between 2 as another good wall from Awesome Jake. I think Amir has looked good so far that we've seen him. SOT comes dunking back down. The Sanctified Field, though, even stronger as Twig gets the kill for that one, 1-for-1. But Fine OK gets Venenu as well, getting him over the wall, perhaps, as Venenu is underneath the tier 2.
Then can't be lazy back in there. Good blink from Mike, though, to get a bit of self-peel. But look at Barrow on the charge and dashes down for Fine OK. As is the ultimate. Can the wall come up in time for Jake? It can, but it's just the wrong side.
And he misses the freeze again. Mike has done such a good job of avoiding these freezes. If you can kind of just get to the side of Amir relatively close to him, then that freeze can miss you. And Mike has made great use of that so far this game. I like to use the ankle breaker as kind of a term for that one. Mike has had a great start here so far, but that's twice he's bit off more than he can chew. I don't have an excuse for him, man.
I do on that one again. You ready? This is support mentality.
All right.
While that
You're
was
sticking
going
up for
on,
each other.
I will, trust me, we have to because we're in a terrible spot right now. When you look at what was going on the left-hand side, and Doug's doing a great job of showing that, Panda Cat just took red, back harpies, and then takes down near enough that whole entire tower on that left-hand side. So delaying Barracuda's back was what Mike wanted to do. Granted, he gets caught and overstays his welcome, that is the mistake, but at the same time there was madness to the method, right? There was a reason for it, and that's why Mike was there doing what he was doing. He wanted to delay Barra as much as possible to give Panda that window. It wasn't enough to get the tower, unfortunately, but it was to do some damage in terms of the gold income on both teams.
Well, that's great awareness from Mike. Obviously, Jing Wei represents a much greater threat in that exact situation than any other hunter, right? With the rapid reincarnation, she gets
Good
back
point.
so
Yeah.
quickly to lane. So certainly I'm there with you, right? The Jing Wei, in terms of getting back in and preventing that overstep from Panda Cat, it's well worth it from Mike, maybe keeping his hunter alive, and he's 1-3 at this point, but certainly impactful, still ahead of Jake, so he really hasn't cost the squad anything as he again joins them on the right-hand side of the map, looking for a blue buff invade.
Yeah, I'll say like Mike made a mistake, sure, but at the same time, the reason was there for why he was doing that. You know what I mean? Like he overstayed his welcome and he got punished for it, but I do think it was the right sort of idea there. Because of that, I'm starting to lean a little bit more Renegades here with how this one's going so far. Like they're looking
played
okay,
well,
apart from they have, and their composition is doing good work so far and working as a unit. And I think that's the one thing we all kind of knew about Renegades. They're a bunch of lovely lads, and they've all got smiles on their faces even when they're losing. But they all are competitors, and they don't like losing, I'll be honest. And I was always worried, like, would they ever pick up the speed enough to really get to that next level? Or will those smiles and the enjoyment of playing together start to fade over time? Because we've seen that with teams before. Plenty of teams have played with their friends, so to speak, but they don't always work out when it comes to trying to win a world championship.
Yeah, I could tell, talking with Ven back in the beginning of the season, that hunger is there for this Renegade squad. They want to go out there and prove it. I mean, these are strong players individually. No one's going to argue with Barra, Van, Lasber, SOT, and their insane mechanical potential, but they have struggled to bring those parts together as a whole so far here under the Renegades banner. I think they're ready to prove they've been putting the work in that break we had between Phase 1 and 2, and that they're a stronger team than they get credit for at times. Ghost is a tough opponent to do that against, though. They're beating just about everyone that gets put in front of them.
But it's a good litmus test, right? Like, how do you do against one of the best teams in the league, right? Or, like, is viewed as one of the best teams in the league at the moment. If you're doing consistently well and can take them to Game 3 or just deep in the games and feel like you've shown that you can improve and you can take these guys on and just correct minor things, it's a long second phase too, Finch. So that, you know, an early like win like that, or an early look at feeling comfortable up against your opposition, it's a good boon more than anything else for the long run.
You make a great point. Everyone plays each other 3 times instead of twice here in Phase 2, so you're going to get multiple at-bats, so to speak. I guess I've been playing too much of the show and just leaking into the cast, but Ghost now pulling in the Gold Fury, and I don't think Renegades, if they know about it, are going to show up. This Gold Fury for free for Ghost. And Hindu, this has been a big problem for Renegades so far this set. They are not controlling these objectives at all. They've been pretty free for Ghost.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's really a downside of Renegades is their objective decision-making. I think they give windows too much to their opposition sometimes, or they turn up late to it and try and make amends, is the way I'm going to put it this time.
Right,
I think
maybe
that's
overstep after.
Yeah, you know, like, well, we made a mistake, so now we've got to answer back. We see that a lot in teams anyway, but I do feel that's something that Renegades need to work on. I do want to say, though, that when you look at their comp for trying to defend in the early game against the Gold Fury, it's not really great, if I'm honest. Venenu, who's playing Persephone this game, Persephone's one that really wants to use that farmer's field to her advantage, so it's hard to try and set up that farmer's field around a Fury without getting a bit of a window to do so. So when it comes to trying to defend it, I mean, she's got to kind of face check and throw the ult out to try and make a real difference maker there. And honestly, Jake more than likely doesn't think about the objective. He looks for kills, from my experience. He's a bloodthirsty human being, and that's okay. But when teams know that you're a bloodthirsty human being, and it can definitely go against you and open up opportunities like that.
Yeah, I think this Renegades comp is way better at holding ground they already have than sort of retaking it, right? Venenu and Awesome Jake with this Amir Persephone pick are great defensive options, and SOT can go up as sort of a satellite, but if they need to reclaim it, things might get a bit tougher for them. As Ghosts continue to aggress into the order side of the map, look at Sam lurking behind the Tier 1. Barracuda seems none the wiser. There comes the root. It's a ton of burst damage. No world where Barracuda makes it out. Even the beads wasted in a losing effort to save his life.
Lack of wards on that left-hand side for me, weakened Tier 1 tower. Rest of the team focused on mid, remember. You just saw Ghost go for a bit of a play off Polar Bear Mike's grapple into that middle area. It didn't hit, but it brought attention to that middle area, so everyone on Renegades was looking to the middle, and the pings came through, actually, from Renegades to say Oleron's rotating, and that's when Barra started backing up. But it was already too late. Sam was behind him and ready to take his life.
So not only the Tier 1 tower in left, but the Tier 2 tower in mid, even a chance for the or Tier 1 tower in mid, rather, and a chance for the Tier 2 in left. Twig is working on Pyromancer, but Lasper has to fall back. That is the Tier 2 tower in left, claimed by Ghost. They have complete map control right now, and look at the kill count. It's dead even, but that belies the 6k gold lead as Lasbra catches the hands from Sam for Soccer in the jungle and has to fall back.
You lose that many towers as well. I mean, Tier 1 mid, Tier 1 left, and the Tier 2 in left too. That's where most of this deficit has really come from. Obviously, a Gold Fury was taken earlier on, but that's where the major backbreakiness has really happened. Now, the good news is, we talked about Jingwei's passive. She's effective at defending, so Ghost can't overstay their welcome on pushing up these lanes too much, and he's going to be able to get a lot of free farm. But if they can keep the lanes pushed up, they can always see Jingwei on the map then, knowing he won't get to the fight.
Venenu's in trouble, tried to use the Grasp of Death. Aegis buys him time too, but Lasbra has the damage. Able to get back there towards Sam for Soccer, steps back into the field to look for Twig. Has some help coming from Awesome Jake, and Venenu gets the kill onto Twig. This is big from Renegades. They needed something, and this 2 for 0 in mid might help a lot.
Yeah, good pickup there, honestly. Just a little bit over-aggression from Ghost, a little bit too confident without the rest of their teammates around, and a bit of lack of respect for the burst potential that Renegades had there. Thought they could just get a pick, but all relics were available. Some were used there. Aegis on Venenu was, in my opinion, used pretty effectively to avoid some of that. But that's where the window really, for me, is the struggle of, like, who's going to peel for them. We didn't get any peelers there that time round, if I'm honest. But now Renegades are trying to find something on the right. There's nothing to really be taken, but they might look at the Pyro here.
Could be an option. They've already got 2 standing on it. Mike narrowly avoids being locked in by the wall. SOT comes over, though, but Mike lives through the freeze. Pyromancer is down low so far in favor of Renegades. They secure it. FineOK can't do enough on his own. He's got 5 members looking at him. Mike comes in as well with the blink, but FineOK was relatively okay. Everything works out, though. Still alive. In fact, FineOK re-engaging, trying to stay on top of Venenu, but the Persephone running for her life. Instead, he collapses onto SOT, and they've got him locked down. Barely makes it up to the sky in time with the ultimate, and the fight rages on.
And in the sky is Thor, but where's he going to come back down towards FineOK, but he's very tanky in the front. Jake gets cut off by his own wall and a double wall, so he's just going to have to sit there and use his ult defensively. But round the corner, Finch, here comes Lasper.
And Barracuda cleans up the kill. That's courtesy of Lasper putting out the damage. What a prolonged battle this has been, trying to make his way into the Bifrost. Panda Cat gets it to work. The Aegis comes out from Barracuda. It all works out, though, as he gets the crit and puts down Panda Cat. But Sam comes in with the Mystic Rush, finds the Jingwei. Now Lasper in some trouble. Sam gets the double, but he's locked inside with Awesome Jake. He needs some help, but none will come. Solar Troll gets the kill, as it's 3 for 2 across the map.
Sam gets a double kill and saves the Gold Fury there, or should I say the Oni Fury. Big play, and now Jake's in trouble too!
FineOK hammering away at him, but it's Twig that gets the kill credit for it. And you're right, Hindu Man. Renegades certainly had their eyes on heading towards that Fury, but absolutely shut down by Sam with that over-the-top ultimate from the Rava. And then look here at Twig. He's absolutely not done, using the Sanctified Field aggressively to keep up the chase. Now he's just looking to strip away the red buff. He'll take it happily and head back towards Oni with Fine.
Yeah, great play from Fine as well, and Twig's communication there. They feel they can force this now, knowing they've delayed the backs a little bit. Twig did use his ult there to try and do that, but the double tap, will he steal it?
Not gonna be the case. Ghost gets the Fury, and SOT not able to make it out of there with his life. I think that's largely okay, Hindu. Maybe a chance you steal that away and keep the game close, but didn't work out there that time for SOT.
No, the only other option for SOT here, I mean, the only negative is a potential Fire Giant look, but I'm not too worried about that, knowing that Olaran just uses ultimate there. Although, as I'm saying that, look at just the army of red start to march towards it. They do have a man advantage for 30 seconds, and Jingwei's in left right now, but their carries are not on the FG just yet, just Panda Cat so far. This might be a mistake.
Yeah, maybe a punishment after all here for that death from SOT. They could certainly use a Thorn now. Awesome Jake makes his way in. Grasp of Death makes it in too, and Sam is isolated. Barracuda is chewing through the team of Ghost Gaming right now. Able to find that first kill is Venenu. Fino K in trouble as well. Captain Twig does lock down Lasbra, and Fine able to make it out of there with this dash from the Vamana. So Ghost Gaming, despite pulling the Fire Giant, end up only losing one and getting a return kill, but even with SOT dying to Fury, not a bad defense from Renegades.
If anything, it just washes out the whole situation there for my liking, which isn't too bad at all from Renegade's point of view, right? Like, Solo Patrol was dead, Ghost commit, and he ends up trading the junglers out in that engagement. So nothing too much too painful. Although, when you look at the relic usage in that last engagement, Lasbra did end up still dying and using his beads there, and that's going to be pretty impactful for the next potential setup of a fight. So expect to see Renegades kind of sit back a little bit for a minute or two, if they can, and let Lasbra get those beads back up. But I don't think Ghost is going to let them do that. Instead, we go again.
SOT right to the sky, should be able to get a good idea of where the Fire Giant's HP is at, and not to panic just yet. Now he'll dunk his way in. Sanctified Field, though, awaits him when he lands.
Oh,
not able to make it out of the
knock-up!
hammer. A great knock-up from Twig to lock in SOT. Awesome Jake still standing through it all. In fact, sets up for Barracuda to make his way in and chew up Fine OK, but Jake will die on the back end. It's a double for Twig, but what about Sam? Lasbra has the damage, but not enough to finish the kill. So now Twig makes his way in, pushes Venenu back over the fire circle, and gets the triple. What a fight from Twig.
Great play from Twig in that engagement. More funny to me was just poor old Jake starting that little corner there. The game floor is lava, right? Like, he was like, well, everything's lava around me, guys. I'm on 2 health. An interesting tale, though, that game. I don't necessarily like how much Renegades overcommitted on that fight. They weren't going to do the Fire Giant in time. It felt like Solo Troll went in looking for a cheeky play. And really, the Fire Giant was no threat at that moment. They could have bided their time a little bit more. But when he went in and that stasis field dropped down from Twig, it was so well timed, as was the knock-up, that just took Solo or Troll out again. And now Ghost have an advantage here on this Fire Giant, and it's relying on the carries now!
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's gotten 2 kills off the Ola Run knockup before, but Captain Twig just did it in that fight. Really impressive stuff, and kind of making the ability look a little stronger than perhaps it is. That's Fire Giant for all 5 members of Ghost Gaming now, and they already enjoy, what, a 6,000 gold lead, very near, and they haven't even gotten the 2 remaining Tier 2 towers in mid and solo. Plus, they can start threatening Phoenixes. Things start to look pretty scary here for Renegades, but how do you like their defense, Henry?
For Renegades, specifically?
Yeah.
Well, they've only lost 2 towers on the left-hand side, so in a weird way, it gets a little bit more simplified of like, hey guys, we've only got to cover mid and right-hand side. They could look to set up shop in mid lane, but where is Venenu is the real question here. And I don't mean to be rude about that. I mean, he's got to set up his plant field, and his plants need to be around the area that they're going to defend. So just watch Venenu on the minimap. Where's he placing those plants, right? Is it going to be at the Phoenix? Is it going to be at the Tier 2 tower? And where did Ghost go off the back of that is going to be the real question. Because I think if they take a fight around the plants, Renegades are in potentially good shape to do a good defensive option there. But taking into account Ghost 4 physicals, it means they've got really good frontline aggression here, a juggling tower aggro alongside a Fire Giant. It might be worth a look for Renegades to sit on the Phoenix line a little bit. Although, the engagements have been back and forth, the gold lead, as we've been saying, is still in Ghost's favor.
See where Ghost elect to go with it. Right now, it looks like they're pushing down mid and right, obviously where those 2 remaining Tier 2 towers are, so this makes a ton of sense. Renegades really only set up to maybe show a soft defense in mid. No way they can defend this right Tier 2, but Lazarus showing up all the same. Yeah, he's got to back up. No way that defense is happening, so this battle will certainly be happening on the Phoenixes instead as Renegades fall all the way back. And as you said, Persephone she's definitely going to be the key of this defense, right? Venenu has got to show up for them in this fight. He's leading all players in damage right now. They're going to need that to show up for him here.
Oh, bit of a pinch attempt from... I like Solo Troll there, right? Like, he came through the jungle area. He's trying to pinch the retreaters of Ghost Gaming because Ghost are trying to farm them out evenly. And what Renegades have really done there is kind of limited some of the pain they could have taken from a Phoenix Siege, because if you lose that Siege, you potentially lose the game off the back of it. Instead, they surrender a lot. A tier 2 in mid, a tier 2 in right, and just wait at the Phoenix line just to try and limit some of that. However, Firegiant's still up for another minute and a half on these boys of Ghost Gaming. I want to see where they choose to go, or will Renegades just look to keep the lanes pushed out enough to wait for the next Firegiant fight?
I've been talking a lot about how strong Barracuda has looked in this game, and I think Ghost have taken notice as well. Look at all of these spectral armors that have suddenly materialized on their side to try and mitigate some of that crit bonus damage that's coming out. Going to make Barracuda less effective against Fine and PBM. Even the Nemean there for Sam said he can get the block stack. They do not want to let this Jing Wei of Barracuda be the one that saved this game for Renegades.
Completely agree, and I think that's a real threat for them here. I know there's a lot of focus on Veneno on defense, but if Barracuda can stay unchecked, it's going to be a big issue. The thing about Barracuda in this game, these gods that he's up against, he's got so much mobility to get in and out, and here we go.
Yeah, Renegades spring the trap, and Captain Twig gets caught in it. Barracuda finds a critical kill. SOT trying to close the gap on the Polar Bear Mike, but now things have gotten a bit scattered here for Renegades. They could certainly get collapsed on by Ghost. There's the blink in for Sam for Soccer, looking for Veneno in the back of the fight, and dunks on him with the Mystic Rush. No chance Persephone can live through that. I like the idea, but they end up trading mid laner for mid laner, and it's about to get worse before it gets better. SOT falls as well, and Ghost answer back perfectly.
Great answer back, but take into account Renegades are just trying to delay if they can on the Phoenix Siege. With Twig not available, it's on Panda Cat, but Panda Cat's low on health too. I think that was a misplay for my liking for Ghost there. They split themselves a bit too thin as they had 2 members in left, 2 in mid and 1 in right. And Renegades smelt the window there and went for it. But can they get the left Phoenix to make sure that doesn't hurt them so much? Or maybe just mid?
Well, they definitely
Looks
got
like it'll be mid. Yeah.
Yeah, that was down already. Left Phoenix low as well, though, as Sam able to move in alongside Fine in mid. Meanwhile, it's Panda Cat and Polar Bear Mike.
Good beats.
One of the best duo lanes we've ever seen in left, but Barracuda with great beads avoids the grapple. What about Lasper, though? He has Fido Cape right in his face in the Colossal Fury form. And that should be it for
Panda
Left Side
missed!
Phoenix. They're going for kills. Instead, Barracuda able to get the better of Panda Cat on the Heimdall. Still, the left side Phoenix stands, puts some shots
Great
into
job.
it, but Barracuda gets the double, and the left side Phoenix still up.
Man, the biggest whiff from Panda Cat there, unfortunately. He went for the big time ultimate to take the kill onto Barracuda, but just out of range. And now, teleporting in his Solo War Troll. Nice little use of that lovely little Mantle of Disco comes into play
Good
as
item.
Twig now turns up to help him, but now Twig's in trouble too!
Yeah, I think you forgot there was a Thor on the other side. My man could just go up to the sky and choose to crush you. That's exactly what happens there. The deicide for Renegades. That all starts, Hindu Man, with that unorthodox defense where they take Twig out of the fight so early.
Yeah, it does, and then the collapse from Ghost happens. Renegades try to regroup, lose a couple of members, lose middle Phoenix, but that left-hand Phoenix Siege was so important to both those two teams there. I think Ghost really went for the knife through butter mentality of like, just end the game here by getting this Phoenix. And in doing so, they gave a window to Renegades to get themselves back into it now. That overextension has just cost them a tier 2 in mid lane, a Fire Giant. Luckily, it's not enhanced. It's probably going to be a tier 2 on the right-hand side too. And I think the next thing we'll see Renegades do is get the Fury after this before going for Phoenixes. And that will just probably bring the gold differential back to an even keel again pre-30 minutes. This is a back-and-forth engagement now. I'm excited.
Wow. Look at these graphs. They shoot back up. Closer to parity, not all the way there. Certainly Ghost still enjoy a bit of a lead, but it's much closer than it has been all game. And the difference in 5,000 team-wide gold is much smaller the later into the game it gets because you're making such big jumps in terms of your spending. Buying the 1500 speed pot or buying those potions in the late game or upgrading relics. Ghost are not in nearly as dominant a position as they once were. They still have fire minions, though, in mid, where that mid Phoenix is missing, and the left side Phoenix is weaker, so Ghosts still certainly have a map advantage, but as you mentioned, Renegades are right back in it.
And I think some of this, I really look at Ghost Comp again. They're so heavily invested in the frontline dive from the Polar Bear Mike, from Fine OK, and from Sam for Soccer. That the backline, if something goes wrong on the front line or the investment doesn't work out, the backline is the one that ends up getting punished consistently. Not necessarily Panda Cat, who's been relatively unchecked for the most part of this game. Just more of an individual mistake there once or twice. But it's more on Captain Twig, who's still 7-4, mind you. But whenever Twig's off the map, that's when you start to see Ghost start to have a bit of an issue here or there now. And just keep an eye on that, because I think the issue is the front line is diving to the likes of a Jingwei. And Jingwei's just got so many escapes, 2 relics that are so impactful, as well as their self-knock-up, as well as that airstrike. It causes so many problems for them. That's where they're having trouble, and it's one of the reasons you saw those Spectrals too.
Oh, looks like Ghosts are going to trade this Tier 2 tower for the Primal Fury. Find OK and
That's
Panda
good.
Cat make their way over to grab it. Meanwhile, they only lose the Tier 2 because Renegades are not going to push any further. Hindu, I'm with you. I think that's about as good as it gets for Ghost in terms of fighting into the enemy team with an FG buff.
Dude, I'd take a Primal Fury, just approaching 30 minutes, by the way, right? It's not a whole ton of gold on the Primal, but at the 30-minute mark, taking less damage from the Fire Giant and doing more damage to the Fire Giant, pretty sure I'd like that in my coffers, please, over a Tier 2 tower on the right-hand side of the map where the Fire Giant is anyway. So, and especially when you're already up in gold before that happened, it works out really well for Ghost. And I think that's really Renegades not went to really make a mistake. They're just surrendering that Fury on the left-hand side. I think they should have gone for Fury first in my eyes, but instead they went for a Tier 2, and Ghost really abused the situation effectively.
Now, if they can get this Tier 2 tower in left, though, this becomes a very productive Fire Giant buff for them, especially when you consider how far behind they were. I don't know if a Phoenix was ever 100% realistic here for them in this push, but getting the Tier 2 towers and opening things up gets better. But perhaps I'll eat my words. Renegades are ready to push up here, Hindu Man, and give a Siege a try.
Defense is a bit tricky as well for Ghost. If you think about it, their wave clear effectiveness is on Oleron and on the Heimdall. Heimdall very focused on the basic attack, so has to step up. And obviously Captain Twig has to channel that big ability damage to nuke through the wave, but he has to step up to fire it to make sure it connects. And there's the windows that Renegades could look to exploit. Defense is tricky, and they're going to try and 5-man this, which I don't necessarily mind the call.
This has been where Renegades have struggled in the past, though. How well can they communicate as a team during one of the most hectic team fights you can have in a game on the base siege? Might get stuns first, not a ton of damage. Awesome Jake drops a wall, but still, Renegades having a hard time finding purchase in Hindu. Their Fire Giant buff is about to run out. This is getting more and more ill-advised by the moment. Awesome Jake moves in for the freeze. There's the Sanctified Field. SOT makes it up to the sky, but he has not dunked down just yet. Renegades want to re-engage. It's a big dunk from SOT, and Barracuda has the damage.
They're killing them all!
Falls first. Polar Mike is in trouble to the left. Twig falls as well. Renegades, through brute force and sheer will alone, able to break open the base of Ghost. That might be the game.
Risky to go for this. Risky to go for this, I'd say, but Sam's got his ultimate. That's the key here. Can Sam kill the damage dealers? If they can do that, that's enough to save the game. But I don't know if they can, because Fine's already dead.
It's a big freeze, though, from Jake. He might have just saved the game because that dunk could have done it. I know Renegades are low, but this is the turnaround they're looking for. Titan low and Fine OK with it all to do here in the late stages of the game, and he can't seem to find any damage. That's the deicide, and that's the game. Renegades, against my own advice and everyone else's, take game number 2 away from Ghost.
That Phoenix fight on the left-hand side there, Finch, it's a good example of what Ghost was trying to do, and it's a good example of when teams wait for the abilities to be used and then re-engage afterwards. Renegades did that really well at the tail end there. You saw all the ultimates get blown immediately to push back the Renegades, and as soon as they were used, Renegades went, okay, now we go in again. They won't expect it, and that was what opened the doorway. Taking into account as well, you just mentioned it yourself, the Fire Giant just wore off on that engagement, and I think that was an extra surprise, potentially. The Ghosts were like, wait, they're going for this after the FG wears off? Crazy.
Yeah, I think you all can't clump up for the SOT Thorold as well. To me, that's really what the backbreaker was on that Phoenix defense, Hindu. I mean, he got to hit like 4 of them with it in the back of that fight, and that makes an easy fight for Barracuda's Jingwei. All of a sudden, we got ourselves a Game 3. I don't know if I was expecting this myself, but I'm certainly excited now. I'll get it back to the desk to set us up for it.
Yeah, Finch, I'm not sure many of us were expecting it, and just like Renegades bent that game to their own will, you too can start bending, but the elements, that is the Avatar Battle Pass is available in-game. You can unlock the Zuko Susanoo skin instantly when you purchase the Premium Pass, and then get Korra Scotty, Aang Merlin, and then, of course, their secondary skins as you progress more through the levels. I wholeheartedly endorse this. It's a great show. It's great skins. Go ahead and get them, because not only that, you can then continue watching great games as you support hi-rez, which we just got to see a very good one there. Mifflin, I don't even know where to start, so you just go for a little bit.
All right, get this, Gore. 1, Ymir 1. Let's go! We got a dub for the Ymir column. Number 2,
We take 'em.
It's not often that we get to just break down a game to 2 critical moments. I think really goes through when Panic Hat wasn't quite able to connect his ability on that left side Phoenix Siege, and then afterward on the same side Phoenix Siege, but this time Renegades, we saw Sanctified Field comes down. Oleron is dealing immense damage to Ymir, then Panic Hat decides to use his own ultimate. He removes Ymir from the playfield so they don't get that kill, and they group up as 4 for that Thor dunk from SOT. I mean, back-breaking plays. I wasn't expecting Renegades to win, but man, what a game.
I mean, being able to come through, I think Solar Patrol helps bring back a lot of moments throughout all of that, but there were good walls throughout a lot of it, and of course we had Barracuda. We had mentioned some of the comfort picks coming in for Renegades in this one, and I think that really played a huge role for them as well. Throughout all of it, this duo lane has been under a microscope. I mean, going up against Polar Bear Mike and Panda Cat is not an easy task, and I think that's been something we've seen. I mean, at the beginning of both games from Renegades, it hasn't necessarily been the easiest duo lane, but this transition into the teamfight phase, it was just phenomenal. And it was this, Fire Giant wearing off, Renegades going back in, kind of catching literally everyone off guard. Finch, Hindu, I think Ghost Gaming themselves, everyone was just a little confused about that one. But it's hard to glance at anyone else. I mean, 4-2-15 looks good, but 10-2-8, Barracuda knocked this one out of the park, Mifflin.
Yeah, I mean, we like to say it all the time about Zapman in particular. This guy's been playing the game for a long time. Of course he's going to be good. You could say the exact same for Barracuda. He's had a very storied career, and he shows it off today. I mean, the damage output, the survivability, the safety. And it wasn't like he got a free coast in his lane. He was getting camped out continuously. Robin ganks were coming through constantly, and it just wasn't quite enough to shut down that Jingwei. That said, man, I mean, you can't let Ghost Gaming control the objectives in the early game like Renegades did. Almost every single Gold Fury, Fire Giant, Pyromancer went the way of Ghost. Luckily for Renegades, one misplay on that Phoenix Siege did bring that game just about back to parity, but you can't be relying on that every single match.
Well, it's going to be interesting if they're able to do it again. I mean, so many things just feel like they line up in that game for Renegades. And like you said, maybe it's not something you can rely on that easily. And also, I don't know if it's something you can craft again a second time for Ghost to be able to group up for some sick Thor dunks throughout the game. So we'll have to see how they change it here in game number 3. A thing that I didn't think I was going to be saying on the desk today. I'm very surprised with Renegades. I think very happy with them as well. And knowing that they can do it means that the competition continues to get closer as the year marches on.
It really does, man. I'd be surprised to see Renegades really change up too much in their draft there. I mean, they played their own game. They even let Ghost get some of these priority picks inside of Oleron, and they were able to just leverage their strategy incredibly well. That Thor out of Soul Lane, I mean, SOT in general is a huge difference maker in that match. He was able to execute global pressure. He kept pressure up in mid. He didn't lose out in lane despite having a pretty weak matchup in a Vamana. I think Ghosts might be the ones who have to figure out what they want to change going into Game 3.
The last time around, this ended up being a Hercules ban coming down from Renegades. They went with Hercules Uller to try and take that away, and it looks like they might honestly just stick to their guns. Oleron last game was a little bit easier to manage than he felt like it was in the first game, although in the first game they handled him pretty well as well. It was the Heimdall that really started to pop off. With Ghost actually kind of surprising me, banning the Oleron has to change my question. Where do you see them going? Freya's still available. If Renegades don't ban that, they get the Uller. Are either of those going to be just incredible picks to have?
Look, I'm never, ever, ever going to slander how strong Freya is, especially in this current meta. I would be surprised to see Ghost not take it here. That said, there's still a lot of meta picks that are available. I mean, Persephone's still up. There's these gods that just control space incredibly well. But Freya being locked in, I don't think anyone's surprised at all. Her damage output, her survivability, her engage potential, her peel potential. This god has all of it. She solos objectives. She solos the enemy laners. I mean, as far as damage goes, you can't do much better than Freya.
Yeah, she kind of good, right? I mean, like, yeah, that's pretty much the synopsis there, is she does well. Yesterday, though, we did get to see a little bit of handling for her. But the problem is, and I think this is, very similar with some auto-attack assassins, right? You can go against them. You can get shells for block stacks and try to pick things up that way, but at the end of the day, Freya just kills you, and like it doesn't matter what you have to stop her, but you give up Jingwei, which Barra just had a stellar game on, we were talking about, and the Persephone, which I think was a very big impact there for Renegades as well. A little slow start, but by the end of it, you saw her damage sitting up at the top of the charts. Is this a good pickup, a good trade for Renegades to give up something so powerful?
It depends on how they decide to play around it. Last game, they gave the power central pick to Ghost inside of Oleron, which was going to go towards mid, which opened them up to having Thor in the solo, which was just another beneficiary that you could use to move and really shut down the Oleron. Thor solo, not going to do much for you this time. That Freya is likely to be going to duo lane, but Ghost Gaming not even to give them the opportunity to take Thor themselves. And now, that's probably the best god you want for ganking out of Freya. You want to be able to kill her while she's CC'd. Anvil of Dawn's going to bring that for you. Back Freya with the Anvil of Dawn, camp out that lane. Panda Cat might just have a field day.
It definitely feels like this Thor has been kind of the linchpin for the win, right? I mean, both sides being able to utilize it incredibly well. And last game, I think it made, like you said, probably the biggest impact for them. Barra just being able to kind of pick up the kills that were set up for him, but they get the tier this time to go over towards the solo. Looking to try and control the pace a little bit with the Vimana ban. I mean, these three feel solid overall for Renegades, and actually, now that I've thought about it a little bit, I just registered in my brain, tier does not always mean solo when it's Renegades, and it took a second for that to sit before it fully clicked. Is this something that can work for them in the duo lane? Let's go ahead and just assume that Jake wants to take it. Up against Horus Freya, does it bully them hard enough?
It is certainly one of the better picks you could have against a Freya. The only thing to stop Freya from killing you is to stop her from auto-attacking fully. I mean, you're not going to lock Bellona for the disarm, so what is the next best option? Get the Fearless, that knock-up, put her into a wall, followed up with another knock-up from Jingwei. She's not going to be able to fight back, or worst case scenario, you're at least able to force out her beads and set up for a gank from your jungler. I think we are very likely to see the 408 piloting the tier in this game, and I'm really excited to see how he plays it into this Freya. He's allowed to play a lot more aggressively as well, trade out his health bar. At least with Power Cleave, he's going to have some sustain.
You can tell the uncertainty isn't just here, right, where it's like, man, so is it solo or is it support? Like, you never know with Jake, and you can feel that in the last two bans from Ghost. One towards Xingqian, and then one towards Pele, where it's like, okay, we definitely need to hit Lasbra a little bit. But also, what if that's tier solo and like Jake's just going to bring the Xingqian, which we saw work well yesterday. So now the question is going to be whether or not this set can bounce back to what we saw last week versus what we saw, well, 2 games ago in game number 1 from them. Amaterasu, I'm starting to feel like a broken record here, but until this AMC, it felt like Ghosts were just playing, again, a tier list that they were just reading off of. Now with Amuz and Cobb more than likely going mid here, how do you feel he fits into Ghost's playstyle?
I think it's going to give you a lot of pressure in mid, which is exactly what you need, but I don't think that's exactly where Ghosts are going to be looking to play through this game. They should be looking to shut down this Jingwei. They should be looking to at least focus out Lazarus, and they've got a fantastic comp for it. Lazarus is going to be looking to reprise last week's performance, but into a Thor, Horus, Freya, Amaterasu, he's going to have a very hard time just finding his damage output. I mean, fantastic peel, fantastic engage potential, but Renegades rounding out their draft with this Terra means that all that engage that Ghost has, they're going to be playing into the best counter engage god in the game.
It's going to be solid, a lot of healing that can come through with her. The only thing that really blows my mind is that Terra was locked in and it still didn't really solidify to me that this tier is going to be solo or support. Like, it's still something that they can, move around depending on how solo or troll is going to be feeling. But you get the Jingwei Persephone, you get a bunch of comfort picks otherwise here for Renegades. Is that enough to tackle the powerhouse that Ghost has picked up, or are we kind of back into game 1 where we're going to see Ghost doing a victory lap 15 minutes in?
Look, I think Ghost has the potential to run away with this game just because of all the pressure they've drafted, but Renegades has a very cohesive team fight composition. If they're able to make it into the mid game from even, they control the objectives a little bit better, we might be looking at a Renegades dub.
Well, will the pressure be too much for them, or will Renegades overcome what a lot of us thought was going to be impossible today and find themselves 2 games in a row? We'll have to see right here now as we go down to Finch.
Thank you, Goran Myth on the desk. We head down to Ghost and Renegades one final time. Finch, Hindu Man, and Doug bringing you the observation. And into this game, Hindu, there's been a lot of talk this weekend and last weekend about Freya and how strong she is. But with the changes to Hecate and maybe a little bit less strength for some of these mage ADCs, how impactful do you see Panda Cat being this game?
Yeah, he's got a big... I think it's really funny, like, he gets the opportunity to play this Freya, and I do want to talk about picks and bans in that sense too, in the fact that that was a bit of a rope it out from Ghost in the picks and bans for my liking. They switched to being first pick, and they had consistently been the ones in the ban phase to ban Freya. Freya gets through, they instantly lock it in. And honestly, for my liking, Panda's like, give me something that I can just swing for the fences for. Because I think the fans at home have been saying they think he's had a rough game, a rough set so far. This is an opportunity for him to shine in this. And Hecate abusers, this is the queen of the Hecate abusers, in my opinion, is Freya. Just because of how her passive intertwines and how it doesn't really affect her in any way negatively for my liking. I still think Hecate is a very strong item, and it's probably shown this game.
We'll certainly get to see the strength of it here. Now remember, we've seen Freya struggle the last couple of times that we've seen it come through. We've seen, I think, a Xing Chen with a very heavily anti-Freya build. We've seen the Pestilence, the Nemean Lion, the Witchblades, whatever it takes to try and keep this Freya in check. For what it's worth, even then it hasn't worked all that well, but Freya has lost with her team struggling around her. Perhaps here, with Ghost drafting a ton of other big threats, maybe this Freya can thrive.
Notice how Jake is 2 here, by the way, and Barra's still 1. That's that laning phase I was talking about, of getting your teammate to lane a little bit earlier and give yourself a lead. And that allowed Jake to, you know, have 2 abilities up. Or technically with Tyr, it's 3 because of the stand switch being available at level 1. It means he's going to be able to sustain a lot more. I do want to touch on as well Solo or Troll this game, because in my opinion, the more and more I watch this Renegades team play, Solo or Troll is such a big, impactful person in this team, and you can really tell it. Like, they rely on him a lot here. So far this set, he's played Sun Wukong, Thor, and now Terra. Warrior, Assassin, and Guardian. When you've got that sort of flexibility, man, in this team, it really opens up the door for you a little bit more. And full credit to him, because I think he's a real silent team player on this team, but I also think that requires him a lot of the time to step up. And we talked about the Thor ults in last game. I think that was one of the windows to success for them, especially that Phoenix Siege.
Yeah, SOT showing the versatility. You're right, man. I mean, it's not just 3 very different gods, 3 very different play styles in terms of how you're trying to help out the fight between the Wukong, the Thor, and now this Terra. Though, not a whole lot of suspense. I think we all knew Awesome Jake was going to have to take this tier over to the support role. It just feels like his signature pick at this point. So it really has opened up the door, I feel like, for Renegades in general. And anything you can do to take the pressure off Lasbra, take some attention off Barracuda. Think about how he got to sort of blend into the background and quietly do a billion damage last game. That's because some of these other guys have been stepping up to take some of the focus off of him.
Completely agreeing, but that's Barry's playstyle too. He wants to just be hidden in the back, and then when he chooses to get aggressive. To be fair, most hunters or most AD carry players want to be that sort of position. They just don't get the reason to. But look at this on right now, an invade early on from Ghost in a level 4 situation too. Interesting.
No ultimates should be able to be impactful this time. Ghosts do steal away the blue buff this time and avoid the wall. So in the Terra set matchup, Ghost able to come out on top.
And the main reason for that, Finch, is because Terra's early game struggles, right? Like, she's not got the greatest effective clear in terms of burst. So abuse that in the early game. Make sure she's going to have to go back a little bit early if she's not going to have to stay, or manage her mana a bit more effectively to stay in that laning phase a little bit longer. I love the idea from Ghost, recognizing where the weaknesses of the early game is in Renegade's draft, and look to abuse them at the same time. And talking about the tier a little bit more, Finch, to go back to that, I think the tier pick into Freya makes a lot of sense for my liking, as we watch him go aggressive, actually.
Banish off the mark there from Panda Cat could end up costing Polar Bear Mike here, but Panda Cat starts blocking the autos. A little bit of an inverse of the roles there as Panda makes sure that Polar Bear Mike stays alive here in this laning phase. But you like the aggression from Awesome Jake here early, Hindu.
I do, and I think the reason I want to say that, why I actually like the tier pick into the Freya specific, is that Freya's going to poke you, she's going to deal damage, but there's not a lot of whole gods that can really resustain off that damage and stay in the fray. Tyr does just that, you know, he uses that power cleave.
Done here for him.
and then he can sustain back up. So it's not a problem for him to take poke from Panda Cat, for example, and then hit the wave to heal back up again. But I think the bigger key here is how Ghost is playing the lane now, which makes a lot of sense to me. Freeze the lane, make the team overextend, and make them stay out of experience range more than anything else. If they want to get an experience range, they come at a cost for their life.
So far, though, things have been going well for the Ghost duo lane. They've also, so far, controlled all the early games, at least for my money, Hindu Man, but Renegades really came back in that game 2 off the back of a Phoenix defense in left, and then a really strong Phoenix siege in left. I don't know if we could see the same thing happening again here from Renegades. Ghosts are not likely to give up 2 games in a row after establishing an early game lead. They might need to make sure they're on more even footing this time.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think we'll see that. I mean, the laning phases, when you look through it, they're relatively even across the board. It's mainly that solo lane that you're going to see a bit of a difference there. I've not touched on the AMC in mid lane yet for Captain Twig, but I think that's going to be a big key to success here for Ghost Gaming, about his positioning and how much he can just keep rocking those bees over and over again and spreading his will around the map. We've seen Dardes do it before, and I do think this is a good selection to balance out the magical versus physical compositions a little bit more most of the time. I know I'm saying that, and Ghosts have gone full physical again, but it does help on clearing Phoenixes and towers too.
That's a good wall, though. The reason SOT is watching the screen in black and white is because Sam for Soccer catches out the dash with the wall. Well timed to make sure that, unfortunately, SOT has to take a seat on the bench. And look at the charts already. 1,000 experience developing, 1,300 gold in favor of Ghost. But all of the games so far, they've gotten the early game lead. They're going to have to convert.
Blinking from the Fearless there as well towards Captain Twig at the back, who is still alive. Mike going to get himself out of the fray too. Bit of investment, I would say, from Renegades there overall. That didn't really come out for much. I mean, I guess they did get the bees out of Twig, so he's going to be careful for the next minute or two.
Yeah, they got the beads out. I was worried you said they got the bees out, because he's got plenty of those as the AMC, but certainly you're right. But there's the banish from Panda Cat, but only Jing Wei can escape like that. Great use of being able to reposition. But how is Sam for Soccer able to save the kill over in right, and then also show up in mid to save Captain Twig's life as well?
And now in
what
left?
an impactful game he's had. Now he's here in left or right. Sam is everywhere throughout this early game.
And funny enough, I was actually going to touch on the fact that Lasby's going to find something in this game to do here. Because when you look at the map, right, Ghosts are looking to pressure the right-hand side consistently, put Solo Watch behind. Check, that's been done. And now the question is Lasby should technically, in my eyes, be trying to over-farm and get ahead of Sam in experience for the aggression that Sam's putting into the solo lane. Instead, he's floundering a little bit. Sam's actually got a lead in experience because of it. And he's walking into Fine OK to try and help out with this buff. But look at the reinforcements coming, Finch! There's 3 members of Ghost over here.
Trying to make sure they can find some aggression. They will indeed strip away this blue buff, and Lasper narrowly avoids a sticky situation. He did not have beads there to help him out, already on cooldown from an earlier skirmish that he was involved in earlier. But this is great from Ghost. We've seen them, I think, in all 3 games try to establish pressure on this blue buff by invading. In Game 2, Ladder was there early with great defenses, but Ghost Gaming re-up on it here in Game 3.
Yeah, and I think the one reason for that is you've got Fine OK in the solo lane. Why would you not empower that man? It doesn't make sense, right? Like, you want to empower Fine OK. He very rarely has a bad game. He very rarely has a bad ultimate, in my opinion. So if he's going to be able to, give him a lead there and go, okay, can you handle it from here? Fine will turn around and go, dude, I would have handled it anyway, bro. What you talking about? But it's just going to make things even easier in the long run. I really think that the crutch of this is Renegades are trying to already answer back to the solo pressure and not look for anything else elsewhere is the problem here. I'd rather look at them look to farm a little bit more effectively and find the wins elsewhere. If Sam's going to be on the right-hand side all this time, in those moments, why is Lasbro not looking to strip reds or try and get back harpies? Sure, it may seem like a tricky task, but it's something you've got to try and look for.
Good wall again from Sam, who's played this door lights out, almost isolated Awesome Jake, but a good job from Venenu stepping up, providing some damage, and making sure that Jake has some cover to reposition. These teams have both been playing very well. And Hindu, I think you said this earlier, and I didn't give you enough credit for it, but this is a sort of litmus test here for Renegades, right? Playing up against who are often considered the best team in the league, certainly the best team for my money right now in Ghost, and they've been giving them a run for their money. Renegades looking much improved so far here in Phase 2.
We kind of saw it some last week against the Sanguine set. I mean, the
I
issue
agree.
there, funny enough, was the Freya that they ran into, and they've got a Freya to deal with here now again. But I think the biggest story is last split, they only really got hold of Obey. Sam will fall there, and now there can be a bit more fight, actually.
Certainly could be. Jake in some trouble. The tier 1 tower is already gone, but it's
yes,
happened here in the solo lane. There's nowhere for Jake to run. That means Ghost able to find yet another kill in trade for giving up Sam for soccer, but support for jungle not going to feel great for Ghost here, I don't think.
Gotta get this blue buff though, we're gonna keep trying for it. I think he actually got it that time. Yes, finally, Renegades get the blue buff, but what does it cost him? Mike's still in there. Grasp of Death fired off as well from Venenu. Mike's in a lot of trouble for that engagement there, and now Fine OK is in an awkward spot.
Renenu able to find that first kill. Fine OK does narrowly
Man,
get the
the
dash to make it
abuse,
out of there,
dude.
but they're still chasing him. Fine OK is not necessarily out of the woods just yet. Lasper looks like he's starting to give up on this one though, so Fine should be alright. But up to the sky goes Sam. Now it's an overcommit from Renegades as he teleports to the hammer. Great wall stun from SOT as Lasper retreats underneath the tier 2, but there is nowhere for SOT to run. Certainly is dead to rights over here in the short lane.
You heard me say the abuse by Ghost Gaming in this game, because look what happens there. The rotation comes out from Venenu with that Grasp of Death to get to that blue buff to turn that fight. Then the chase of Fine OK's on. But because Venenu's there, Twig's like, hey, I'm an AD carry in mid lane. I'm also AMC. Why don't I just take this tier 1 tower in mid lane? And not only pre-10 minutes, basically, do we see Renegades through that right-hand tower, they also lose the middle one. This is just a bigger win out now for Ghost to get aggressive, because you have a Thor in the jungle too, right? Like, he's got a big old window now where these guys have got to step up to get the waves, and there's nowhere to fall back to. This is feeding frenzy time, potentially, for Sam for Soccer.
It's very scary if you're Renegades. You do not often see the map opened up like this early on in the game. Pre-11 minutes, all these towers leaving the map exposed for Renegades. Perhaps looking to see if there's a red buff invade. Sam thinking better of that though. Hammer use the teleport out of there, and it would have been way too early for a red buff invade anyway. Ghost retreat back to their own side of the map.
Yeah, realistically, Renegades are already in, like, limit the losses mode, realistically, and Ghosts just have to choose their windows when they want to strip away objectives in the jungle. Take the reds when there's an opportunity, continue with the blue pressure, and just keep Renegades on the back foot trying to answer questions, because they're all down on levels now with how this is going. This is a big game for now Barracuda, who's looking across the map going, alright, everyone's losing. Bugger, I've got a Freya in lane. What am I really going to do against a Freya in lane? I guess I just need to farm like my life depends on it, because to win this set right now, it really does.
Well, that is the Pyromancer down. I like this to the skies ultimate, perhaps looking
Love
to
it.
see if someone was making a rotation. He takes the team right underneath where the mid-tier 1 tower should be. Jake has to blink just to get out of there, but Sam still teleporting to the hammer. Good Fearless from Jake, collects 2 members and avoids getting caught out. Grasp of Death from Venenu locks in 3, but Lasper can't join in because Sam kept him zoned. Now Lasper makes the way over, but Panda Cat has shown up and gotten the kill onto Venenu. Now Sam dunks down as Awesome Jake falls as well. Ghost now starting to close the hammer on top of Renegades and give them nowhere to run.
Yeah, and now it's turned into a Fury too. You know what, that little engagement there, you saw the blink from Jake, right, and I thought his position was beautiful. He blinks into the way to protect his carry, and I love that call from him. Gets a good Fearless off, and then Venenu fires the Grasp of Death, right, and it's more of a defensive ultimate usage rather than aggression. But for some reason, the communication on Renegades got a little bit skew with for my liking there, and instead of just, like, retreating and staying alive, which is what the call should have been, they all get aggressive, and Ghost went, wait, are they trying to fight us still here? Okay. Panda Cat rotates in. Sam was waiting in the wings. One by one, like dominoes, Renegades fall. And the lead just catapults again. It's 13 minutes in and a 6k gold lead. Crazy, crazy situation. And Renegades really on the back foot, just looking for scraps at this point. 7k experience, Finch. We always talk about gold, but the experience is more monumental. Just because of base stats, just because of base damage value of your abilities overall comes into play.
Especially at this point in the game, Venenu tries to make the hero play with the Grasp of Death, but Captain Twig, especially with the AMC movement speed under the hives, easily avoids it. And you know, I kind of want to go back over Barracuda's career, because I feel like no one has had less say in picks and bans than him. He's always going up against whatever the best meta hunter is, I feel like, for Barra. Playing up against the Freya, always in a tough spot, but he always comes out ahead too, so maybe he doesn't mind going up against the best of the best.
I don't give him the respect. He always plays Jingweis and Souls, man. Like it's, these crutch picks.
He's got
you know,
He's always against the Freyas of the day, you know. He's got to play Soul.
The
or whatever.
barrier I love, right, is the Anher that's leaping in a semi-final at Worlds, trying to kill 3 people and killing 2 and turning the game. You know, I do agree though. Like, yeah, Barrett doesn't get a lot of credit for how he plays his laning phase. He looks like a defensive god player style. It's mainly because a lot of people realize how valuable he is and how he has to adjust for the sake of his team. But this is more pressure again in this game for my liking. And you can see that he's actually got a level lead over Panda Cat so far. So he's recognizing that. He's adapting to that situation. I just don't think it's enough on his own in the long run. He's going to have a teammate join him into this game and be another supporting factor. Look at the level differentials again, though, which I know I keep mentioning, but when your jungler's not got his second relic online, when your support's not got his second relic online, but the enemy teams do, that is a huge swing at the moment. The Ghosts are just looking for more scalps at this point.
They are, and I know that Barracuda's ahead in levels, but not ahead in relevance. Look at how Panda Cat shreds Lasbra at this point in the game. He'd shred anyone who dares to step into auto-attack range. Freya does so much damage. And now in comes the dunk from Sam for Soccer. Over the wall, though, goes Awesome Jake with that Fearless, so nothing really lost there. But this should now be the Tier 1 tower for Ghost. Renegades have to fall back.
And then that's going to cause more knock-on effects too, because you can see that in mid lane, Venenu's just trying to farm where he can when everybody's not around. Same can be said for Solo Watch on in that solo lane, just trying to pressure up the lane. Whereas Ghost, they take the towers and they're like, okay, no one's here. Well, if they're going to leave this lane exposed, we'll group there and continue the pressure, continue to extend the lead. Ghosts are playing this exactly as you expect them to, honestly. And Renegades is just having a hard time on trying to find an answer because they're at such a deficit early on. They might have to make a crazy play, and I'm looking at the mini-map, and you can kind of see 4 men just trying to run down that dual lane for a second. I like the idea, you know, to get back in this, we're going to start trying to open things up a little bit more.
Oh, poor Jake, you're only level 10. I don't think this fight is for you. I like the idea, though, trying to stick away as Mike feigns a back there. I think with Twig rotating over, they are never leaving in this situation. He cuts them off on the top side. Good maneuver there from Barracuda to make it out, and the stinger off the mark there from Twig. That might have set up for a pick onto Barracuda. At this point, though, Ghost have to just fall back instead.
Yeah, saving grace of that Stinger missing. The damage output from a Stinger is really impactful, more so than a lot of people realize. Funny enough, though, we don't really talk about Twig again, but look at that build. He picked up Sledge early on. I will say Twig is the most experimental mid laner in terms of defensive items overall. I think Paul is one that will go for a defensive item like a breastplate of valor on certain gods, but Twig's the one that will bring out the shells like he's done here, but also look for the advantages of just staying in the fight more often. Said it earlier on, you don't do damage if you're dead, and a lot of carries sometimes need that survivability to keep dealing out the damage. And so having a Sledge online, when you look at the composition the Renegades have drafted here, Solo Wattrell, Lasbra, and Jake will all be in that B's face. And that means he's getting 30 all procs from them being around him at times, not even factoring in the fact there's a ton of health on it too.
An excellent pickup, really, I think, for just about anyone that's looking to do physical damage at this point. A really strong item that allows you to still have some relevant damage and pick up quite a bit of health and tankiness all in one item. Now, as much as we're kind of singing the praises of Sledge, it's not being picked up here in all these situations. We see Blackthorn Hammer there for Awesome Jake, and this is an item I thought had been put kind of into the back of the locker at this point. We weren't going to see much of it anymore, but it's picked up here for Jake.
I'm not so sure about it in this game either. I mean, cooldown reduction's a real reason for this. Sure, you get MP5, right, Finch? But you're already getting that from your Talaria boots anyway, for my liking. So I don't know necessarily he needs it for the mana, he wants it for the cooldown reduction. 10%'s important, but here's a Pyro fight, and is it really a fight at this point? Do trees fall? Do trees still die if no one hears them? Yada yada? Man, that was a bad analogy, but you know where I was going.
Yeah, I promised Lasbra was there for a little while, but he is no longer evaporated by the damage from Sam for Soccer at this point. Only level 13 for the set. It's difficult for him to have any impact in these fights now. Now Ghost are going to take the Fire Giant, and I agree wholeheartedly with Renegades on this one. There's no way you can show up to try and defend this Fire Giant at this point. That's free for Ghost.
I'll be honest, I think the disappointment level for Renegades there was, oh man, they're going to get Pyro off that, and then you hear the Fire Giant noise, and you're like, oh no, they got Fire? man, that was terrible. And then they're like, oh wait, and they get Pyro too? Well, at least we got a tier 1 tower, I guess. You know, like, look at the upsides a little bit, answer back some of that lane. Really rough situation for Renegades, especially after how Game 1 and Game 2 went. I think, honestly, though, when you look at any like high-level play most of the time, when you get to deciding games, sometimes it's more often than not, it becomes a very one-sided affair, which is unfortunate. You don't always get those amazing games that you're hoping for.
Barracuda has the ultimate forced out there on the left side. Not sure if that'll quite end up coming into fray. I doubt Renegades are really looking to fight Ghost Gaming at this point anyway, but certainly goes to show the presence Sam is having. And I know that we had a bit of fun about it back in the early game, talking about how Sam was everywhere, but there's certainly a nugget of truth there to the hyperbole, in that Sam is one of the most impactful junglers in our league, man. He really makes his impact felt throughout the early stage of the game, because some junglers prefer to play where they hyper farm early in the game and have their impact later, but Sam is always active.
But I've got to give some credit to the rest of his team too, because Ghost do so well in their own laning phases individually. It takes the pressure off a jungler to an extent, right? Like, the jungler's a little bit more free to roam around. He's not having to save someone. For example, the Terra pick in solo lane struggling in this game, so Las was like, well, I guess I'm going to have to sit over here most of the time to help out. Sam gets a bit more freedom to do what he wants, and that just opens the door a bit more often for these junglers to make the impact that people don't expect.
Mike is the one in first. Looks like mid-Phoenix is the call here from Ghost with 2 minutes left on the Fire Giant buff. They send Sam over to left. He grabs the tier 2 tower there and has a mini wave pulling up that pulls Lasbra over to the left lane to try to defend. Looks like they're considering a 2-3 split. No Twig will come back over to mid to join them. Meanwhile, take a look at where Mike and Panda Cat are. They're going to burn down the tier 2 tower in right. I love how Ghost kind of forced Renegades to defend mid, and then they spread out and grab the towers.
And here's the thing, right? I think they should have just taken that tier 2 in right before going for the Phoenix siege more often than not. But one thing you've seen on that siege there is Freya's damage to towers and phoenixes is lackluster, period, is the answer. And the reason we've got an AMC here is to adjust for that. Now, when it comes to the defense for Renegades now, when you think about that situation that Panda doesn't deal damage very well to phoenixes or towers, but AMC does, priority target from Renegades should be in their brains, AMC, kill the AMC to reduce the Phoenix falling. But if you do that and you don't look at that Freya, guess what Freya's going to do? End everyone.
Pop off. Yeah.
Exactly. So it
does,
becomes an even trickier task for them to work out what's next. I love this from Mike too, by the way. Is anyone sniffing around here? Can we catch someone overextended? Hey, look at this! It's Barracuda!
Yeah, but they end up settling for Lasbra. Get the beads out from him early and the ultimate from Barracuda. Renegades have to overreact in those situations because they will get punished. There's the banish onto the level 12 awesome Jake, and he is no more. Good news is his respawn timer is relatively short, so he might be up for to try and help out with this fight, but they're going to need to defend quickly. Hindu Man already, the left side Phoenix is under threat, but Final K gets locked down under the Phoenix. Good reposition from him as Sam for Soccer patiently is engaged. Now he takes his time to move in. They get rid of Benenu, they get rid of Solo or Troll, and suddenly left side Phoenix fully exposed. In fact, Lasbra about to drop as well. Benenu does get the kill into Sam, but Fine returns the favor.
Little greedy from Ghost here, going for all these kills instead of just taking down the Phoenix. I'm always going to call teams on that, but they get the win. I think if they would have gone for Phoenix first, they could have potentially still looked for more of this, but instead they've got to fall back now. Fire Giant wears off. Great fight from them again, but you're seeing exactly what we expect in that fight, right? Like, Renegades can't really muster to the strength that Ghost have in terms of itemizations and levels right now. Jake was already dead during that engagement. Sure, he was only dead for 30 seconds on that. That's 30 seconds in a 4v5, and when the team's got a Fire Giant, you get punished heavily. Ghosts are looking great here. I think this is almost a statement game from them in a sense, in terms of we made mistakes in game 2. Let's be honest, we gave them a window and they took it, and so Ghosts are back to the best, but then it comes down to picks and bans again. I think Renegades have to start to realize that they have not found an answer for Freya yet. It's been a couple of times I've seen them let Freya get through, and a couple of times now that Freya has done very well in the games or been a threat to them. Sure, player damage isn't the highest for Freya, but we all know the potential she has and how much of a threat she brings to the game. It's definitely an issue.
1-0-3 for the Freya, but certainly the leader here in this game in terms of impact has been Sam. He's been everywhere, setting up everybody else in the game. This will be the second fire giant of the game that will go down uncontested for Ghost, and Renegades couldn't dream of stepping out of their base to challenge. Instead, any kind of miracle defense they're going to make is going to have to happen to the mid and solo side Phoenixes. Look how far behind they are at this point. 16,000 gold is the deficit at this point. 16,000 experience too, and that's still relevant. We already talked about how baby awesome Jake is.
Yeah, I mean, there's one member of Renegades that's level 20 right now. Now, what you saw on the minimap, by the way, was a ton of pings. They said a naughty word then. Ton of pings across the map, right? Where it shows that ghosts are aware of where the Oni minion wave is. And that left-hand side is an Oni fire minion wave, Finch. That's even more impactful here. If that gets through to that Titan, it's going to cause problems. And that's why ghosts are doing this. Just pressure everywhere else. Minions could win this game on their own here.
They certainly could, as Fine just walks in and takes the middle. Phoenix gets some help towards the tail end there from Sam and from PBM, and now Ghost can set their sights entirely on right. Venenu gets grabbed first, but there is no follow-up damage. Right Phoenix still healthy for now, but Mike charging up to the skies. They're looking to reposition. They're going right to the Titan. They don't need the right side Phoenix at this point because this game could end right here and right now. They move to the Titan room, but Awesome Jake comes as well, but there's the dunk from Sam for Soccer. Panda Cat gets Venenu. They're absolutely wiping the floor with Renegades, and that's it for game number 3. Ghost come back with a big statement win.
Like lambs to the slaughter. That really was at the tail end of that game, and it started off really quickly in that early game. That pressure they got on the tower in the early stages, constant blue buff invades, it drew Last Viz's attention in, he falls behind because of it too, and then there's a trickle-down effect across the whole of the map where everybody falls behind. Even Venenu gets drawn to help out in the solo lane, and that opens the map up mid. So Ghosts just pull Renegades around wherever they wish and take that game consistently well. Really well played on map control from Ghost there.
But I think that we are starting to see a trend from Ghost. I think now that's twice where you could argue they've made some late-game missteps that have forced them into a third game. That affects your plus-minus down the road, and against better teams, it could affect the outcome of the set. I know how strong Ghost are looking right now, but they got to make sure they're maintaining that focus. That's going to do it here for Hindu and I, though. We'll get it back to the desk, though, so they can break it down from here.
I'll give you one quick synopsis. Ghost is good at SMITE. There's game 3 in a nutshell. Ghost is just really, really solid. I think from the very beginning, though, Mifflin, you start to see some of that, I want to say, aggression start in the jungle, and then it grows immensely for Sam. He has a fantastic game on this Thor, and you start to see the love get spread from Sam's, Hammer, I guess, at that point. It spreads down. Amaterasu starts to do really well. Mid starts to rise up. Everybody on Ghost rises to the occasion with him up in the Anvil of Dawn, and it just looks good from top to bottom. I mean, he's 7-2-6. You have a couple of members, 3 members, that don't die on Ghost. Where did it all go wrong?
The second they let Sam lock in Thor is where it went wrong. I mean, Panda Cat getting Freya. The Ghost Gaming got exactly what they wanted. And if I had to classify the playstyle Ghost brought into Game 3, it was almost as if they weren't concerned at all with what Renegades were doing. They were, I'm going to walk here, I'm going to do this. If Renegades is there, they'll die. And that was the exact plan. Every single objective that Ghost pulled, they were like, well, if Renegades show up, we'll kill them. If they don't show up, we get an objective. And the majority of the time, Renegades just didn't show up. I think a lot of it has to do with that duo lane. Awesome Jake 408 fell irrecoverably behind. I mean, at one point backstage, I said, I don't care that he just made a sick play. He's level 10 to a level 14. He's not going to get any value anyway. I mean, but we can't take it away from Sam, man. This guy was active from minute 0 and didn't stop until the Titan fell.
And much like you had said, there was even a point where I think Finch had called it out saying, well, hey, at least Jake's going to respawn fast. And I realized it was 22 minutes in and he was still level 12. So unfortunately, falling behind there, the experience definitely played a huge role in this late game. But Sam just landed everything he needed to. I mean, it's so easy to get a Thor montage when you have a game like that afterward because it just looked solid every single step of the way. And every single one of these last team fights starts with what? That's right, him going up into his ult to be able to dunk down. I just think it comes down to control, and they did it well. But, you know, you look at that last game, and that was a very characteristically Ghost game, right? I mean, they win it very fast, 25 minutes-ish. So a very quick game overall. Starts off with early control. The jungle does really well. Like, everybody has a good game. And that just feels stereotypically Ghost. But when you look at the first 2 games, Renegades really did push them to a limit a little bit further, caused a little bit more trouble. So it kind of gives me some hope for the Renegades here in the future.
It really does. I mean, we've been saying this about Renegades since Phase 1, though. They're always showing these flashes of brilliance, but they always struggle with 2 things. 1 is controlling the objectives in the early game, and 2, even when Renegades pulls ahead, they kind of flounder around and they don't push it that much further. Compare it to Ghost. They get 1 pick, alright, let's get Gold Fury. 1 pick, Pyromancer. 2 picks, Fire Giant. 16 minutes in, doesn't matter to them. I think if Renegades is able to clean up their objective control, they don't even necessarily need to get objectives themselves, they just can't keep giving them away for free.
That's going to be the key going forward. They don't have a chance to redeem themselves this week, so we'll probably be seeing them in the weeks to come and what changes they can make watching that footage. Ghost Gaming, though, do take that one 2-1. The Knights are up for their second time this week, this time taking on United, maybe a little bit closer than the matchup they had against Radiance, and potentially a must-win based on where they're sitting overall in the standings, something that they have to be able to scoop up and kind of show to set themselves apart from the rest of the pack. Because right now, when we're looking at it, you have, well, it looks like a very common story, Mifflin. Ghost Gaming, surprise, surprise, up at the top. SSG, Radiance, Sanguine, sitting right behind them. It really is climbing out of that 0-2 bottom portion, those bottom 3, that is going to make the big difference here.
Yeah, United and PK both have a lot to prove in this match against each other. I mean, it could go either way, but whoever does pull ahead is going to be a huge boon not only to their standings, but also to their morale. Going down 0-3, getting into that obey territory, it's never going to be a good look.
And I think the fact that you're mirroring what is, well, mirroring maybe is the wrong term. You're doing the opposite of what we're seeing out of Ghost. They're 3-0. They have an incredibly solid game going in there, incredibly solid set going in there, and they look like they are much on their rise to the top once again. And, well, what better thing to do than to ask them about how they're feeling over it. We've got Fine OK standing by to see how they feel after this dub.
Thanks, Core. I am indeed joined by the solo laner here for Ghost after an excellent set we just saw for them up against Renegades. And I got to start here, Fine, by asking you about Sam. I mean, such an excellent set. He's been great for you all so far. Talk to me about his presence on the team, and I guess how easy does it make it for you when he plays this well?
Sam's awesome. I mean, he's a really good teammate. He kind of just knows what he needs to do in every given moment, and I think we work really well together. We used to be on a team together, Team Cryptic, back like 2 or 3 years ago. So we have a lot of built-up synergy from then, and we kind of just get along. So as far as our interactions with each other, I think it's pretty easy just to run around and kill people, you know, in-game.
Right, in-game. Well, it seemed like you all were working on blue buff invade to this set, at least from what I can tell. You don't have to give me too much of the behind the scenes, but how do you all go about deciding where you're looking for pressure? Is it based on god picks or the enemy team you're facing, or how do you all decide?
It's a mixture of everything, like usual. It's kind of depends on like what picks we get and what picks they decide to go for. Obviously, if they're gonna first pick Osiris and play around solo lane, then we'll have to like change our game plan. But if they're gonna, pick stuff like Terra and kind of not do anything, then we're gonna try and abuse that. You know what I mean? So, so it kind of just depends on the situation and everything. But I think we like to play around our star players. So obviously they want to play around me.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. I think if I have Fine OK on my team, we're trying to win in solo. You guys have been on a hot streak as a team, obviously winning the Phase 1 playoffs and undefeated so far in Phase 2. In general, what's clicking for you guys? Is it just that you get along well as a team, or do you guys think you're ahead on the meta right now?
I think we just really get along together. We all have similar interests, and we all have the same game plan of, playing for Worlds and trying to get another title for some of our players and trying to get a first title for people like me, Ben, and Pete. So I just think we work really well together, and to be honest, I think individually we're all just like probably, I believe we're the best players in each of our roles, but I just think that in general you could look at our team and think that we are some of the best players in each of our roles. So I think a lot of times you'll see that in games by just like the skill difference. So.
No, I don't think you're too far out of pocket with that at all, Fine. Always great to get a chance to hear from you, man. Thanks for talking with me, and looking forward to seeing your next game. And we have another set coming up. It'll be a quick break. We'll be right back with plenty more SPL.